Before we begin, make yourself comfortable, let your shoulders soften, let your breathing slow, and allow the day to loosen its hold on you. Wherever you are listening from tonight, a quiet bedroom, a warm couch, a distant city, or somewhere between waking and sleep, you are welcome here. Tonight's story is a gentle mystery about rain, old books, warm lamplight, and a hidden bookshop that appears only when someone needs it most. As you listen, there is nothing you need to solve quickly, nothing you need to hold tightly. Let the story carry you at its own pace. And if this quiet tale helps you rest, you can leave a like, subscribe for more peaceful stories, and comment where in the world you are listening from. It is always lovely to imagine these stories finding people in soft corners of the night. Now, settle in. The rain has begun, and somewhere, after midnight, a brass bell is waiting to ring. No one in the old town remembered when the little bookshop first began appearing. Some said it had always been there, tucked between the apothecary and the narrow blue house with the leaning chimney. Others insisted there had never been any shop at all, only a blank stone wall where rainwater gathered in silver threads before slipping into the gutter below. But there were stories, quiet stories, the sort that were not told loudly in market squares or written into guidebooks, the sort that lived in the pause between one cup of tea and the next, or in the low voice of someone standing beside a rain-streaked window, remembering something they were not entirely sure had happened. A widow once claimed she had found the shop on the first winter after her husband passed, when she had walked the streets past midnight, because the house felt too large and too still. She said the door had been painted green, though no one could remember a green door on that lane, and that inside she had been handed a small blue book with no title. She never told anyone what was written in it, only that she slept well for the first time in 11 months. A retired schoolmaster said he had seen the shop once after losing his spectacles, his temper, and his confidence, all on the same rainy evening. He swore there had been a brass bell above the door, and a cat asleep on a stack of atlases. When he returned the next morning, there was only the blank stone wall again, damp and ordinary, with ivy curling around the edges. A young woman who worked at the bakery said her grandmother had spoken of it too. A bookshop that appeared on rainy nights after midnight. A shop that could not be found by those looking for it, but sometimes found those who had stopped knowing where to go. Most people smiled when they heard these stories. They were fond of them, in the way old towns are fond of their own harmless mysteries. The bookshop became part of the weather, part of the midnight bells, part of the soft superstition clung to the cobbles after rain. But Elena Vale did not believe in it, not because she disliked wonder. Elena was a librarian, and librarians, despite what hurried people sometimes thought, were among the last keepers of wonder left in any town. She believed in the quiet magic of a book opened at the right hour, in the mercy of a sentence that met you exactly where you were, in the strange companionship of stories written by people long gone, and yet somehow still beside you. She believed in wonder very much. She simply did not believe in shops that appeared and disappeared. Leilani liked things that could be catalogued. She liked call numbers, return dates, dust jackets, repaired spines, and the soft wooden drawers of the old card catalogue. She liked the gentle order of shelves, the careful placing of poetry beside poetry, history beside history, and the small thrill of discovering that a reader had wandered into the wrong aisle and found the right book by accident. Her life was quiet, and she had made a home inside that quiet. Every morning she unlocked the town library at 7:45. She switched on the green-shaded desk lamps, opened the tall windows if the weather allowed, and set a small pot of tea behind the circulation desk. At 8, old Mr. Bellamy arrived to read the newspapers, though he read them mostly for the pleasure of complaining about the typeface. At 8:30, children from the primary school passed by on their way to class, waving through the windows. By 9, the first readers drifted in. Elena knew them all by their footsteps. Mrs. Arlo, who loved botanical essays and returned every book smelling faintly of lavender. Daniel Pike read travel memoirs, but had never once left the county. Young Clara Finch, who pretended to borrow books for school, but secretly loved ghost stories, though Elena always chose the gentler ones for her. And then there were the quiet readers, the ones Elena noticed most, people who did not know what they wanted, only that they had come in looking tired. They lingered near the shelves without touching anything. They read titles with their heads tilted, as if listening for a voice that might call their name. Elena was very good with those readers. She never rushed them. She had learned, over many years, that most people did not walk into a library searching only for books. They came searching for courage, distraction, company, forgiveness, memory, escape, or a reason to believe the next day would feel a little softer than the last. So she would ask gentle questions. Are you looking for something quiet? Something with a hopeful ending? Something that feels like walking through a garden? And more often than not, she would find the right story. That was her gift. It was not dramatic. It would never make her famous. But in the old town, where the winters were long and the rain fell often, it mattered. 4 years, Elena had helped others find what they needed. She had not noticed how long it had been since she had found something for herself. That autumn, the rain came early. It began in the last week of September, soft at first, tapping lightly against the library windows, silvering the rooftops and darkening the old stone streets. Then it stayed. Day after day, it washed the leaves into the gutters, blurred the windows of the shops, and made the whole town smell of wet wool, chimney smoke, and old paper. By October, everyone had accepted the rain as a kind of additional citizen. It attended breakfast. It walked children to school. It waited outside the bakery, whispered along the eaves of the church, and followed shoppers home in the folds of their coats. Elena did not mind rain. Rain made people read. On rainy days, the library grew full and warm. People came in shaking umbrellas, stamping boots, laughing softly as they escaped the weather. The reading-room windows fogged at the corners. The lamps glowed golden. The floorboards creaked beneath slow, careful steps. But as the weeks passed, Elena began to feel a quiet heaviness she could not name. It was not sadness exactly. It was more like being misplaced. She continued with her routines. She stamped due dates, shelved returns, recommended novels, mended torn pages with careful hands, and smiled whenever someone thanked her. Yet at the end of each day, when the readers had gone and the library settled into its old breathing silence, Elena found herself standing between the shelves, unsure why she had walked there. She would run her fingers along the spines. She would pause near the poetry. She would look toward the tall window where rain threaded itself down the glass. And then she would remember she was alone. It surprised her every time. Not the fact of being alone. Lena had lived alone for years and was not unhappy with her own company. Her small flat above the library was warm, clean, and full of books. She had a kettle that hummed, a writing desk by the window, 3 houseplants of uncertain determination, and a faded armchair that had shaped itself to her body over time. But lately, the solitude had begun to feel different, not empty, unanswered. There was a difference, though she could not quite explain it. On the night the bookshop first found her, Elena stayed late at the library. The rain had been falling since morning. It struck the windows softly, steadily, without anger, the kind of rain that seemed to have all the time in the world. By closing hour, the streets outside were shining black beneath the lamps, and every passing carriage wheel sent quiet ripples through the puddles. Elena walked through the library with her ring of keys, checking each room as she always did. In the children's corner, a wooden horse leaned patiently beside a basket of picture books. In the reference room, the large atlas lay open to a map of old sea routes, though she did not remember anyone using it that afternoon. In the reading room, the coal fire had burned low, glowing softly behind the grate. She gathered 3 forgotten books from the tables, a collection of essays on birdsong, a novel about a woman who inherited a house by the sea, and a small green volume with no library label on its spine. Elena frowned. She lifted the green book gently, turning it over in her hands. The cover was cloth, worn smooth at the corners, with no title, no author, and no mark of ownership. It was not one of theirs. She knew the library's collection too well. Perhaps a reader had left it behind. She opened it. The first page was blank. The second page was blank as well. So were the third and fourth. Elena turned several more pages, expecting a diary, a notebook, perhaps an old ledger. But every page was empty, thick and creamy, with the faintest scent of rain and cedar wood. Then, near the middle, she found a single line written in dark blue ink. Not all lost things are trying to be found. Elena stood very still. The rain whispered against the windows. She read the sentence again. Not all lost things are trying to be found. The handwriting was neat but old-fashioned, with long loops and careful spacing. It looked like the sort of hand one might find in a letter tied with ribbon and stored in a drawer for many years. Elena turned the page. Blank. She turned another. Blank. She went back to the sentence and touched it lightly. Oh, she knew better than to touch ink with bare fingers. It was dry. Completely dry. As if it had been written long ago. A soft creak sounded somewhere behind her. Elena looked up. The library was empty. Of course it was. Old buildings made sounds at night. They settled. They shifted. They sighed in their sleep. Still, she closed the green book and carried it to the circulation desk, where she placed it beside the returns. She would ask about it in the morning. Someone would surely come back for it. But no one did. The next morning, Elena found the book exactly where she had left it, except that another line had appeared beneath the first. Not all lost things are trying to be found. Some are waiting to be understood. For a long time, Elena simply looked at it. Then she did what any practical librarian would do. She made tea. She told herself that someone must have entered the library before opening, though the doors had been locked and the windows latched. She checked the sign and ledger, then the back room, then the narrow stair leading to her flat. Nothing was disturbed. No footprints marked the polished floor. No umbrella leaned in the stand. No reader waited with a guilty expression. Only the green book remained on the desk. That day, Elena carried it with her like a quiet question. Between helping Mr. Bellamy locate yesterday's newspaper and finding a book on watercolor techniques for Mrs. Harlow, she opened the green volume several times. The 2 lines remained unchanged. No more appeared. By noon, she had convinced herself that she must have missed the second line the night before. By 4, she had almost believed it. By closing, she had placed the book in the lost property drawer and told herself firmly that mystery was often only order waiting to be discovered. That evening, as she walked home through the library's side door and up the narrow stairs to her flat, the rain began again. It came gently at first, touching the rooftops with careful fingers. Elena made soup, sliced bread, and sat by the window with a book she had been meaning to read for months. It was a well-reviewed novel, beautifully written, highly recommended by at least 4 readers, whose opinions she trusted. She read the first page. Then she read it again. Then she realized she had understood none of it. The words were fine words. The sentences were elegant. The story should have interested her. But her mind kept returning to the green book. Not all lost things are trying to be found. Some are waiting to be understood. At 11:30, Elena gave up and closed the novel. The town outside was quiet. Rain shivered under the street lamps. Across the lane, the bakery windows were dark. Oh, the ovens would be lit again before dawn. Beyond the rooftops, the church clock rose in a blur of stone and shadow. At midnight, the clock began to strike. 1, 2, 3. The sound moved slowly over the wet town, deep and soft, softened further by the rain. Elena listened until the 12th bell faded. Then, beneath it, where there should have been only silence, she heard another sound. A small brass bell, clear, delicate, close. She turned toward the window. Across the street, between the apothecary and the narrow blue house with the leaning chimney, there was a bookshop. Elena did not move at first. The rain ran down the glass in silver lines, blurring the shape of it, but there was no mistaking the warm light in the windows, the dark wooden sign above the door, and the little green-painted entrance topped to her yesterday. There had been only a blank stone wall, a bookshop, small, narrow, warmly lit. Impossible. Elena stood. Her chair made a quiet sound against the floor. She crossed to the window, one hand resting against the sill, and looked down. The shop's windows glowed with amber light. Books were stacked in uneven towers behind the glass, some upright, some leaning, some open as if interrupted mid-sentence. A small lamp burned on a table near the door. Above the entrance hung a sign that moved slightly in the rain. Lana could not read the words from where she stood. The brass bell sounded again. Not loudly, not insistently. It was simply there. A small bright note in the rainy dark. Elena's first thought was that she must be dreaming. Her second was that if she were dreaming, she might as well put on her coat. She moved slowly, almost carefully, as if sudden movement might disturb the strange arrangement of the night. She pulled on her dark wool coat, wrapped a scarf around her neck, took her keys from the hook, and paused at the door. Then she went back for the green book. It was still in the lost property drawer, though she was certain she had left the library lock below. In the dim light of the desk lamp, the cloth cover looked darker than before, almost the shade of moss after rain. Elena held it beneath her coat and stepped outside. The rain met her gently. It was cold, but not unpleasant. It tapped on her umbrella, gathered along the edges of her scarf, and turned the cobbles into small, shifting mirrors. The town was deeply quiet. No footsteps, no voices, no passing carts, only rain, the distant murmur of gutters, and the occasional soft drip from the eaves. Elena crossed the narrow street. The shop remained where it was. As she came closer, she could read the sign. It was written in gold letters on dark wood. The rain-bound bookshop. Beneath it, in smaller script, open when needed, closed when found. Elena stood under the small awning and read the words twice. Then the door opened by itself, not dramatically, not with a rush of wind or a theatrical groan. It simply opened a little, with the modest courtesy of a door that had been expecting her, and did not wish to make a fuss. Warm air breathed out from inside. It smelled of paper, cedar shelves, black tea, beeswax polish, and something faintly sweet, like oranges drying near a fire. The brass bell above the door rang once as Elena stepped in. Inside, the bookshop was larger than it should have been. This was the first thing Elena noticed. From the street, it had seemed narrow, hardly more than a single room squeezed between two buildings. But within, the shop stretched back into a warm maze of shelves and lamps and shadowed alcoves. Books rose from floor to ceiling. Ladders leaned against rails. Small reading chairs sat beneath shaded lamps. Tables held stacks of volumes tied with ribbon, maps rolled into brass cylinders, and little bowls of bookmarks made from pressed leaves. Rain moved softly against the windows. Somewhere toward the back, a kettle hummed. Elena stood just inside the door, her shoes damp on a faded rug patterned with stars. "Good evening," said a voice. Elena turned. Behind a small counter sat an elderly woman wearing a gray cardigan, round spectacles, and an expression of such calm expectation that Elena immediately felt she had arrived late to an appointment she did not remember making. The woman's hair was silver and pinned loosely at the back of her head. A book lay open before her, though she had turned it face down as Elena entered. Beside it sat a cup of tea, a brass reading lamp, and a sleeping cat the color of smoke. "Or good morning, I suppose," the woman added, glancing toward a clock that had no numbers on its face. "It is sometimes difficult to say after midnight." Elena held the green book a little tighter. "I am sorry," she said. "I did not mean to intrude." The woman smiled. "No one intrudes here." Elena looked back at the door, half expecting to see the street vanish. But through the window she could still see the rain, the apothecary, the blue house, the familiar curve of the lane. The world had not disappeared. It had simply made room for something else. "I'm Elena Vale," she said, because names felt useful when nothing else did. "I am the librarian across the street." "I know." The woman said this kindly, not mysteriously. Elena waited. The cat opened one eye. considered her, then closed it again. "And you are?" Elena asked. The woman touched the spine of the book in front of her. "Most people call me Mrs. Wren. Do you own this shop?" "At times." Elena looked around. "At times?" Mrs. Wren nodded. "Some places are not owned in the ordinary way. They are tended." This was exactly the sort of sentence Lena would have underlined in a novel and distrusted in real life. "I found this book in my library," she said, holding out the green volume. "I thought it might belong here." Mrs. Wren looked at it, but did not take it. "Ah," she said softly, "it found you first, then." Elena almost laughed, but the sound did not come. "Books do not find people," she said. Mrs. Wren's smile deepened, very slightly. "Librarians say that more often than anyone, and believe it less than most." Lena did not know how to answer. Mrs. Wren gestured toward the shop. "Would you like some tea?" "I should probably go." "Yes," Mrs. Wren said. "Most people should. Very few do immediately." Rain tapped the window. Elena looked down at the green book. "Why is it blank? Is it?" "There are only 2 lines, 4 now." Elena opened it quickly, intending to show her. But there were 3 lines now. "Not all lost things are trying to be found. Some are waiting to be understood, and some are waiting for the rain." A slow shiver moved through Elena, not of fear, but of recognition too faint to name. Mrs. Wren watched her gently. Elena closed the book. "I do not understand what this is." No," said Mrs. Wren. "But you came anyway." Elena looked again at the shelves, at the lamplight, at the cat breathing in soft gray waves beside the teacup. Outside, rain blurred the windows, making the town look distant and tender. She should leave. She should go back to her flat, hang her coat by the door, place the green book in a drawer, sleep if she could, and return in the morning to find only the ordinary stone wall between the apothecary and the blue house. Instead, she said, "What kind of bookshop only opens after midnight?" Mrs. Wren folded her hands. "The kind that is not selling books." Elena waited. "The rain-bound bookshop lends what is needed," Mrs. Wren said. "Sometimes a book, sometimes a page, sometimes a sentence, sometimes only a quiet chair and enough lamplight to remember one's own thoughts." To whom? To those who are quietly lost. Elena looked at the green book again. "I am not lost." "No," said Mrs. Wren, half loudly. Words settled between them. Elena wanted to object. She had a home, work, purpose, routine that held together neatly. She was known in town, respected, useful. Every day, people came to her with questions, and almost always she could answer them. She was not lost. And yet, beneath that thought, something tired lowered its head. Mrs. Wren rose slowly from her chair. She said, "There is no need to decide anything at the door." Elena followed her into the shop. The floorboards creaked softly beneath them. The shelves were arranged in no system Elena could identify, which made her immediately uncomfortable. A row of travel journals stood beside cookbooks, which leaned against poetry, which rested near books about weather, clocks, grief, orchards, and the history of spoons. Some books had titles stamped in gold. Some had handwritten labels. Some had no titles at all. "How do you find anything?" Elena asked. Mrs. Wren glanced back, usually by not looking too hard. Elena frowned. The cat had risen from the counter and now followed them at a dignified distance, tail held high. "This is unacceptable cataloguing," Elena murmured. Mrs. Wren laughed softly. It was a kind sound, like a page turning. "Many people have said so, especially librarians." They passed a table covered entirely in blue books. Another held books wrapped in brown paper, each tied with string and labeled only with a mood. For a tired heart, for when the house feels too quiet, for a journey that ended before you were ready, for forgiving yourself, in small amounts. Elena slowed as they passed that last one. Mrs. Wren did not comment. At the back of the shop, beneath a stained glass lamp shaped like a crescent moon, there was a small round table set for 2. A teapot waited there, along with 2 cups, a plate of shortbread, and a vase holding a single sprig of rosemary. The tea was still steaming. "I did not know I was coming," Elena said. The kettle did. Again, Elena nearly laughed. Again, she did not. She sat. Mrs. Wren poured tea into a blue cup and placed it before her. The steam smelled of chamomile, orange peel, and rain-wet mint. Elena wrapped both hands around it, grateful for the warmth. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. This, more than anything, persuaded Elena to stay. People often filled silence too quickly. They hurried to explain, excuse, entertain, or ask. Mrs. Wren did none of these things. She sat comfortably, as if silence were not an absence but a room of its own. The cat leapt onto a nearby chair, skurkled twice, and folded itself into sleep. At last, Elena said, "Why does the shop appear only in rain?" Mrs. Wren looked toward the window. "Rain softens edges," she said. "It blurs the hard lines people draw around their lives. Streets become mirrors. Windows become veils. Footsteps slow. People remember things they are too busy to remember in sunlight." Elena watched a raindrop slide down the glass. And after midnight. Midnight belongs to neither one day nor the next. It is a threshold, a good time for finding doors. Elena looked around the bookshop. "How long has it been here?" Mrs. Wren stirred her tea, though she had added nothing to it. "Depends on who is asking. For some, it appeared last winter. For some, 80 years ago. For one man, it opened in a town that no longer exists." "That is not an answer." "No," said Mrs. Wren, "but it is true." Elena sat back. She should have felt overwhelmed. Perhaps she did. But the shop had a way of making even impossible things feel unhurried. The rain, the lamps, the rows of sleeping books, the warmth of the cup in her hands, all of it seemed to say there would be time enough for understanding later. Mrs. Wren nodded toward the green book. "May I?" Elena passed it to her. The old woman opened it with care. The pages glowed softly in the lamplight. She read the 3 lines and smiled, but there was a sadness in the smile, old and gentle. "This one has not opened in a long while." "What is it?" "A beginning." "To what?" "That will depend on what you allow it to become." Elena looked at her over the rim of her teacup. "You speak almost entirely in riddles." "Only before 1 o'clock." Despite herself, Elena smiled. Mrs. Wren closed the green book and placed it on the table between them. "Tell me, Elena Vale, when did you last choose a book for yourself?" The question was so ordinary, so simple, that Elena almost answered quickly. But no answer came. "I read often," she said. "That was not the question." Elena looked down at her tea. She thought of the stack beside her armchair. Books recommended by readers. Books she had ordered for the library and felt obliged to inspect. Books she had begun because they were important, useful, praised, requested, or overdue for attention. When had she last chosen one simply because it called to her? She could not remember. Mrs. Wren waited. Lena took a slow breath. "I help other people find books," she said. "Yes, that is my work." "Yes, I am good at it." "Very." The gentle certainty in Mrs. Wren's voice made Elena's throat tighten unexpectedly. "I used to know what I wanted to read," Elena said, surprising herself. "When I was young, I would wander through shelves and feel as if the whole world were speaking at once. I could hardly carry home enough books. I read under blankets, at breakfast, while walking, which was unwise. I read because I wanted to know everything and go everywhere." She paused. The rain filled the silence. "And now," Mrs. Wren asked, "now I know too well where everything belongs." Mrs. Wren did not answer immediately. Somewhere in the shop, a book shifted on a shelf. Elena looked up. It was a small sound, no louder than a sigh. Then another book moved. Then another. From a shelf near the back, a narrow volume slid out by half an inch. Mrs. Wren glanced toward it. "Ah! Did you do that?" "No." "Did the book?" "It seems to think so." Lena stood slowly. The book waited on a high shelf beside a brass lamp. Its cover was deep blue, almost black, scattered with tiny silver marks like rain seen through lamplight. Elena reached for it. Before she could touch it, another book slid out from a shelf to her left. then another from below, and one from a stack on a nearby chair. 4 books now waited, each slightly extended, each silent and patient. Elena looked at Mrs. Wren. "How am I meant to know which one?" Mrs. Wren sipped her tea. "How do your readers know?" "They usually do not." "And what do you tell them?" Elena was quiet. Then reluctantly she said, "I tell them to notice which one they keep looking at." Mrs. Wren smiled. Elena looked again. The blue-black book caught the lamplight softly. There was no title on the spine. The silver markings were not stars, as she had first thought, but tiny drops of rain. She took it down. It was warm. Not warm like something near a fire. Warm like a hand that had been waiting inside a glove. On the cover, words slowly appeared in silver ink. The Book of Rainy Doors. Elena held her breath. Below the title, another line formed. For those who have forgotten that thresholds open both ways. The shop grew very quiet. Even the rain seemed to soften. Mrs. Wren rose and came to stand beside her. "That," she said, "is a fine first book. I do not know what it means. Most first books do not explain themselves too quickly." Elena ran her thumb along the cover. "Am I supposed to read it here?" "If you wish. And if I do not, then you may take it with you." Elena looked back sharply. "You lend books?" "Of course." "For how long?" "As long as needed." "How do you know when they are due?" "They come back." Elena, who had spent many years pursuing overdue books with polite, firm notes, found this answer deeply unsatisfactory. "What if they do not?" Mrs. Wren's expression softened. "Then they are still needed." The answer was so unlike any library policy that Elena could think of no reply. She looked down at the Book of Rainy Doors. A part of her wanted very much to open it. Another part wanted to place it back on the shelf and return to the ordinary world, where books did not choose readers and shops did not appear under impossible conditions. But the title had already moved something in her. Rainy doors, thresholds, both ways. She thought of all the people she had helped step into stories over the years. She had stood at the doorway, smiling, holding it open for others. When had she last entered? The clock without numbers gave a soft tick. Mrs. Wren gathered the cups. "You need not begin tonight," she said. "The first visit is often only to learn that the door exists." Elena looked around the shop once more, at the warm shelves, at the rain, at the cat sleeping with one paw over its face, at the hidden alcoves, the strange labels, the ladders rising into shadow. "Will it be here tomorrow?" she asked. Mrs. Wren carried the tray to the counter. "Will it rain tomorrow?" "Yes, after midnight." Elena almost smiled. "Likely. Then perhaps that is also not an answer." "No," Mrs. Wren said warmly. "But it is also true." Elena tucked the Book of Rainy Doors beneath her coat. At the door she paused. The brass bell above her stirred without ringing. "Mrs. Wren?" "Yes." "Why me?" The old woman stood behind the counter, one hand resting on the green book Elena had brought with her. "Because you have spent many years helping others find the books they needed," she said. "And tonight one wanted to return the kindness." Elena did not trust herself to speak. She stepped out into the rain. The door closed softly behind her. When she reached the middle of the street and turned back, the bookshop was still there, glowing between the apothecary and the blue house. Mrs. Wren's silhouette moved behind the window. The cat stretched on the counter. The sign swayed gently in the wet night. Then the church clock struck 1. A gust of rain passed down the lane, light as breath. The lamps flickered, and the bookshop was gone. Only the blank stone wall remained, dark with rain. Elena stood beneath her umbrella, holding the Book of Rainy Doors close to her chest, and listened to the town settle back into itself. For the first time in many weeks she did not feel unanswered, only invited. Elena slept very little that night, though she rested more deeply than she expected. She lay in bed beneath her blue quilt, listening to the rain move along the roof tiles, and watched the faint shape of the Book of Rainy Doors on her bedside table. It did not glow. It did not whisper. It did not open by itself. It simply waited with the patient confidence of a book that had no need to prove anything. Every so often, Elena turned her head to look at it. Then she closed her eyes again. Near dawn, she dreamed of standing in the library as rain fell indoors. Not heavily, not in a way that damaged anything. It fell softly from the ceiling in silver threads, passing through tables and chairs and shelves without wetting them. Every book in the library opened at once, pages turning in the rain, though there was no wind. At the far end of the reading room stood a door she had never seen before, green, with a brass handle. She woke to pale morning light and the smell of rain-washed stone. For a few seconds she did not move. The dream lingered round her, quiet and almost warm. Then she turned toward the bedside table. The book was still there. Its dark cover looked ordinary in daylight. Beautiful, perhaps, but not impossible. The silver raindrops were now dullest red. The title remained, neat and still. Elena dressed carefully, as if preparing for inspection. She chose a gray wool dress, pinned her hair, and made tea stronger than usual. She did not open the book. Not yet. Instead, she carried it downstairs to the library before opening hour and placed it on her desk. The library looked exactly as it should. No indoor rain. No mysterious green door. The shelves stood in their proper rows. The newspapers waited in their wooden rack. The card catalogue held its thousands of quiet answers. Elena found this reassuring. At 8 o'clock, old Mr. Bellamy arrived. "Terrible rain," he said, shaking his umbrella with great seriousness. "It is October," Elena replied. "That does not make it polite." She smiled and handed him the newspaper. By 8:30, the day had settled into its usual rhythm. Readers came and went. A mother asked for books about trains. A young man wanted poetry but looked embarrassed by the fact, so Elena guided him to a shelf without using the word poetry at all. Sus Harlow returned a book on roses, borrowed one on moss. At 11, Clara Finch appeared in a yellow raincoat. "Do you have anything mysterious?" she asked. "But not too frightening?" Elena nearly laughed. "Yes," she said, "I think I do." She found Clara a novel about a missing necklace, a winter garden, and a grandmother who knew more than she admitted. Clara held it to her chest with satisfaction. As the girl left, Elena glanced toward the dark blue book on her desk. A thought came to her quietly. Perhaps every bookshop was magical to someone who needed it. Perhaps she had simply forgotten. At lunch, Elena finally opened the Book of Rainy Doors. The first page held a dedication for Elena Vale, who has held doors for others. She stared at the words for a long time. Then she turned the page. The first chapter was only 3 paragraphs long. There are doors that open into rooms. There are doors that open into weather. There are doors that open into memory. And then there are doors that wait until the hand reaching for them has grown tired of pretending it is not reaching. Elena exhaled slowly. Outside, rain moved down the tall windows. In the reading room, someone turned a page. A log settled in the fireplace with a soft inward sigh. She read on. The book did not tell a story in the usual way. Or perhaps it did, but not in a straight line. There were fragments, descriptions of doors in unlikely places. A red door at the end of a pier. A white door painted on the side of a mountain cottage. A little black door beneath the roots of an ash tree. A door made entirely of rain, visible only in reflection. Some opened outward, some opened inward. Some, the book said, opened only when no one was watching. Elena read slowly, though the pages seemed few. Every time she turned one, another appeared after it, as if the book were growing only as quickly as she was willing to continue. Near the middle, she found a handwritten note tucked between 2 pages. It was on cream paper, folded once. Elena opened it carefully. The handwriting was not Mrs. Wren's. It was smaller, less steady. "I found the blue door on a night when I had forgotten how to ask for help. It did not give me an answer. It gave me a room with a chair, a fire, and enough silence to hear the answer I already knew. I hope your door is kind." There was no signature. Lena held the note with both hands. A strange tenderness moved through her. Someone had read this before her. Someone had needed it. Someone had left these words not for everyone, but for whoever came next. She folded the note again and returned it to its place. That evening, after the library closed, Lena checked the lost property drawer. The green book was gone. She had expected this, though she could not have said why. In its place lay a bookmark made from pressed rosemary. In Mrs. Wren's neat hand were 4 words: "Bring back only yourself." Elena stood behind the desk, holding the bookmark, listening to the rain. For the rest of the evening, she moved through her tasks more slowly than usual. She shelved books. She closed windows. She banked the fire. She wrote 3 reminder notes for overdue returns, but made them gentler than normal. At 10, she went upstairs. At 11, she made tea. At 11:30, she sat by the window with the Book of Rainy Doors, unopened on her lap. At midnight, the church clock struck 12. This time, she was already watching. The lane remained empty. Rain fell steadily. The apothecary windows were dark. The blue house leaned as it always had. The blank wall between them shone with water. No bookshop. Lena told herself she was relieved. She was not. She waited until 12:15, and then 1:30. Still nothing. The book on her lap seemed heavier. At 1:10, she stood, feeling faintly foolish, and put on her coat. She tucked the Book of Rainy Doors beneath her arm and went down into the street. The rain was softer than the night before, almost mist. It gathered in her hair and on her eyelashes. She crossed to the blank wall and stood before it. There was no door, no sign, no warm light, only stone. Elena reached out and touched the wall. It was cold and wet and entirely real. "Of course," she whispered. She did not know whether she was speaking to herself, the wall, or the absent shop. She turned to go. Then, in the puddle at her feet, she saw a reflection. A green door. Elena froze. The wall before her remained blank, but in the rainwater below, the reflection of a door shimmered softly, complete with brass handle, warm light beneath the frame, and the faint outline of a sign above it. Elena looked up. Nothing. She looked down. The door waited in the puddle. Her heart beat once, slowly. She remembered a line from the book. A door made entirely of rain, visible only in reflection. Carefully, feeling more curious than afraid, Elena lowered her hand toward the puddle. Her fingers touched the surface. The rainwater was warm. The brass bell rang, and the green door opened in the wall. Not in the reflection, in the wall itself. Light spilled softly over the wet cobbles. Elena stood very still, her hand still hovering above the puddle. Then Mrs. Wren's voice called from inside. "Do come in, dear. You will catch a chill arguing with architecture." Elena stepped through. The rain-bound bookshop seemed different that night. Not entirely. The same warm scent of tea and paper greeted her. The same brass bell rang overhead. The same cat slept in a place clearly inconvenient for anyone wishing to use the counter. But the shelves had shifted. With the night before they had risen in cozy, crowded rows. Tonight they curved gently like lanes in an old town. Small signs hung from the ceiling on ribbons. For leaving without knowing where to go, for homesickness that has no address, for questions asked too late, for those who are tired of being useful. Elena stopped beneath the last sign. Mrs. Wren appeared beside her with a teacup. "I thought that section might be near the front tonight." Elena accepted the cup automatically. "I am not tired of being useful. No." Elena looked at the shelves. The books in that section were mostly small. Their covers were soft shades of brown, green, blue, and gray. One was bound in linen. One had a spine repaired many times. One was wrapped in a ribbon the color of fog. "I like being useful," Elena said. "That can be true at the same time." "At the same time as what?" Mrs. Wren's voice was gentle. "At the same time as being tired." Elena said nothing. Rain brushed the windows. Somewhere deep in the shop, pages turned. Mrs. Wren nodded toward a reading chair near a small round window. "You may read anywhere you like tonight." Elena glanced at the counter. "Are not there other customers?" "Sometimes." "Will there be tonight?" "There already are." Elena looked around. At first, she saw no one. Then she noticed an old man seated in a shadowed alcove, reading a book with a green cover. Near the back, a young woman stood before a shelf with one hand pressed to her mouth, as if holding in tears or laughter or both. A boy of about 12 sat cross-legged beneath a table, though he seemed not at all surprised to be there, reading a volume larger than his head. Elena lowered her voice. "Are they from town?" "Some. And the others from places where it is raining." Elena considered this. Then she decided not to ask further before tea. She took the Book of Rainy Doors to the chair by the round window. Outside, the view did not show the town. Instead, rain fell over a garden she had never seen, where stone paths wound between dark hedges and white flowers shone faintly beneath the night sky. She opened the book. A new chapter waited. The first door is rarely the one that changes everything. It is only the one that teaches the hand to reach. Elena read until the shop grew quieter around her. The chapter told of a woman who had found a blue door beneath a railway bridge, after missing the last train home. It told of a man who had opened a yellow door in the side of his own pantry after realizing he had not cooked a meal for himself in months. It told of an old gardener who refused to open any door at all, until a green one appeared in the bark of his favorite apple tree, and smelled so strongly of spring that he forgave it for being impossible. The stories were strange, but they were also ordinary. Each person found a door. Each door led somewhere quiet, not to treasure, or prophecy, or dramatic revelation, but to a room, a garden, a shore, a memory, a table set with tea, and each returned, carrying something small, a word, a recipe, a pressed leaf, a name they had stopped saying. Elena turned a page and found another note. This one was written in pencil. "I thought I wanted the door to take me away. Up it took me back to the room where I had left my courage. I had not lost it. I had only forgotten where I set it down." Again, there was no signature. Elena leaned back in the chair. Outside the round window, rain silvered the unknown garden. The white flowers nodded in the dark. Warm lamp reflected in the glass, and for a moment Elena saw her own face layered over the scene. She looked tired. Not dramatically so. Not in a way anyone would stop her in the street and ask if she was well, but tired in the quieter way, the way a candle looks tired when it has been burning faithfully for many hours. Mrs. Wren appeared with the teapot. "More?" "Yes, please." The cup was refilled. Elena watched the tea settle. "Mrs. Wren?" "Yes." "Why does everyone leave notes in the books?" "Not everyone, but some." Mrs. Wren looked toward the shelves. "Some readers find comfort in knowing someone came before them. Others find comfort in leaving comfort behind." Elena touched the pencil note. "Do the notes always reach the right person?" "No," said Mrs. Wren. "But they often reach a person who can become right for them." Elena thought of the readers in her library. The uncertain ones, the embarrassed ones, the lonely ones pretending to browse local history. She thought of all the books that had passed from hand to hand without those hands ever touching. "I like that," she said softly. Mrs. Wren smiled. "I thought you might." The old woman moved away, leaving Elena alone with the rain, the book, and the soft murmur of the shop. For a while, Elena simply sat. She did not read. She did not think in the hard, useful way she was accustomed to thinking. She listened to rain, to pages, to the quiet clink of cups, to footsteps somewhere in the stacks, to the cat purring in its sleep. After a time, the boy who had been reading beneath the table approached her chair. He held his enormous book with both arms. "Excuse me," he said. Elena looked up. He had serious eyes and damp curls. "Yes. Are you a librarian?" Elena smiled. "I am." "I thought so." "What gave me away?" "You look like you know where books go." He considered this. "Most of the time." He looked down at the huge volume in his arms. "This one will not let me finish it." Elena glanced toward Mrs. Wren, but the old woman was nowhere in sight. "What do you mean?" "Every time I get close to the ending, it adds another chapter. That sounds frustrating." "It was," he said. "But now I think maybe it does not want me to rush." Lalina nodded solemnly. Books can be stubborn about pacing. The boy seemed relieved to have this confirmed. Do you think I should keep reading? Do you want to? He thought about it. Yes, but slower. Then I think that is your answer. The boy smiled, thanked her, and returned to his place beneath the table. Elena watched him go. Something in her chest loosened. Even here, in an impossible bookshop, she was still herself. Or perhaps, she thought, being herself did not have to mean standing outside every story and helping others enter. Perhaps there was a chair for her too. The clock without numbers chimed softly. Not one, not two. A sound like a page being turned by the night itself. Mrs. Wren called from the counter, "Hosing soon, dear." Elena looked down at the book of rainy doors. The page before her had changed. At the bottom, in silver ink, a question waited. "What door have you been walking past?" Elena read it once. Then again. A quiet answer rose in her, but she did not want to look at it directly yet. There was a room in the library she never opened. Not because it was locked, not because it was forbidden, because it had been her father's office. Before Elena became librarian, her father had held the post for 32 years. He had taught her the difference between a book that was old and a book that was merely tired. He had let her stamp due dates when she was little, though she often stamped them crookedly. He had believed that every town library was a kind of harbor, and every reader a ship allowed to come in from weather. After he died, Elena took over the library with steady hands. She cleared his desk, sorted his papers, answered letters, continued subscriptions, repaired budgets, comforted patrons who came in with flowers and stories. She had done everything that needed doing, except enter his office set. After the first month, the room remained at the back of the library, behind the reference shelves. Over the years, it had become storage, boxes of old programs, spare lampshades, a broken globe, winter decorations, things without urgency. Elena told herself she had no reason to go in, but perhaps that was not the same as being finished with it. She closed the book. Mrs. Wren was watching her from the counter. Elena stood slowly. "I think I know what door," she said. Mrs. Wren did not ask. She only nodded. Outside, the rain had softened to mist. The shop door opened onto the familiar street, where the apothecary sign dripped quietly, and the blue house slept under its leaning chimney. Elena paused on the threshold. "Will the book come back?" she asked, holding the book of rainy doors. "When it is ready." "When I am ready, you mean?" Mrs. Wren smiled. "Sometimes there is little difference." Elena stepped outside. The bell rang once. The door closed. And when she looked back, the bookshop remained for a single breath longer, warm and golden in the rain, and it folded itself into the night. The blank wall returned. Elena walked home slowly, holding the book beneath her coat. Above the rooftops, the clouds thinned just enough for a few pale stars to show. Rain kept falling, softly now, almost kindly. And in the library behind her, in the dark little office she had not opened for years, something waited without hurry. The office behind the reference shelves. The next morning, the rain had thinned to a silver mist. It hung over the town like a veil, softening the chimneys, the church tower, the wet slate roofs, and the narrow lanes that curved between the old buildings. The cobbles outside the library shone faintly in the early light. Water gathered in the grooves between stones, reflecting small pieces of sky that looked almost blue, though the clouds had not yet parted. Elena woke before her alarm. For a while she stayed still beneath the quilt, listening. The town was not fully awake yet. Somewhere below, a cart moved slowly for the lane. A gull called from the direction of the river. In the flat above the library, the kettle sat silent. The house-plants leaned toward the window, and the book of rainy doors rested on the bedside table with the steady patience of something that knew it would not be ignored forever. Elena turned her head and looked at it. The silver raindrops on the cover had brightened slightly in the gray morning, not glowing, exactly, more like thread catching light. She thought of the question that had appeared on the page the night before. "What door have you been walking past?" She did not need to wonder any more. She knew. At the back of the library, beyond the reference shelves, and the old local history cabinet, It was a narrow wooden door with a brass handle darkened by age. It had once opened into her father's office. When he was alive, the room had always smelt of ink. Pipe tobacco he never smoked, but kept in an old tin because he liked the scent, furniture polish, and the peppermint sweets he kept in the top drawer for children who were trying very hard to behave. As a girl, Elena had loved that office. It had seemed to her then like the heart of the library, not the grandest room, not the room readers admired, but the small hidden chamber from which everything quietly worked. Her father kept handwritten acquisition lists in neat piles. He repaired book spines at the wide desk beneath the window. He wrote letters to publishers, answered town council notices, sharpened pencils with a little brass sharpener, and kept a second teapot on a tray because he believed no important decision should be made while thirsty. There had been a green armchair by the window where Elena would curl up after school, reading whatever book she had found that day. Sometimes her father would look up from his work and ask, "Where are you now?" And Elena, without lifting her eyes from the page, would say things like, "On a ship near the Arctic," or "in a castle with too many staircases," or "in a forest where the trees are listening." Her father always nodded as if these were perfectly reasonable locations for his daughter to be. "Send word if you need collecting," he would say, and she would turn the page. That was how the office had lived in her memory, warm, safe, full of paper and lamplight. But after he died, the room changed. Or perhaps Lena had changed before entering it again. She had sat at his desk once, during the first week, while letters waited unanswered and condolence cards leaned in little rows along the window-sill. The chair had felt too large. The room had smelled exactly the same, which had been worse than if it had smelled different. She had opened the top drawer to find the peppermint tin. It was still there. After that, she had closed the drawer, left the office, and slowly allowed the room to become storage. No great decision had been made, no dramatic farewell. One box had been placed there, because there was nowhere else to put it, then another, then spare lamps, old event posters, a cracked globe, bundles of outdated town directories tied with string. By the time a year had passed, the office was no longer a room one entered. It was a place one opened only halfway, slid something into, and closed again before memory had room to stand up. Elena had become very efficient at not seeing it. But now, as she dressed in the quiet of the morning, she could feel that door waiting below, not accusingly, not impatiently, only waiting. She made tea and buttered a slice of toast, though she ate only half. The Book of Rainy Doors sat beside her cup. She had not opened it since leaving the rain-bound bookshop, and yet she carried the sense of its pages with her, as if they had continued turning somewhere in the back of her mind while she slept. At 7:45, Lena went downstairs and unlocked the library. The familiar click of the key steadied her. She stepped inside, breathing in the scent of old paper, rain-damp coats, polished wood, and the faint trace of last night's fire. She moved through the usual morning tasks with deliberate care. Lamps first, then curtains, then the return box, then fresh water in the vase near the front desk, where she arranged 3 late autumn chrysanthemums brought in by Mrs. Arlo the previous afternoon. Everything in its order, everything in its place, except, of course, the one room that had become the opposite of order. Elena did not go to it immediately. She told herself there were practical reasons. The library would open soon. Mr. Bellamy would arrive exactly at 8. She needed to check the newspaper rack. The children's corner needed tidying. Someone had left a muddy footprint near the history shelves. All of these things were true. None of them mattered. At 8, Mr. Bellamy came in with his umbrella and his usual expression of mild disappointment in the weather. "Still raining," he said. "Misting," Elena replied. "Rain trying to be clever." She handed him the newspaper. At 9, 2 students came in asking for books on local architecture. Elena led them to the town history shelf and found them a volume with detailed drawings of old doorways, which felt pointed enough that she nearly put it back. At 10, The reading room filled. A woman with a sleeping baby settled into the chair by the window. Aniel Pite borrowed a travel memoir about the Scottish Islands, promising, as he often did, that one day he would go farther than the train station. Clara Finch returned the mystery Elena had chosen for her, cheeks flushed with satisfaction. It was exactly mysterious enough, Clara said. That is the best kind, Elena told her. All morning, life moved around Elena in its gentle library rhythm. Pages turned, umbrellas dripped, chairs scraped softly, the fire was fed, the rain pressed pale fingers to the windows, and still, at the back of the building, the office waited. By early afternoon, the mist thickened into rain again. It was not heavy. It fell straight and fine, silvering the glass and making the whole library feel wrapped in a shawl. The readers grew quiet. Even Mr. Bellamy stopped muttering at the newspaper and fell asleep for several minutes, one hand resting on the crossword. Elena stood behind the circulation desk, looking toward the reference shelves. The brass handle of the office door was just visible beyond them. She took a breath. Then she took the Book of Rainy Doors from beneath the desk, as she had placed it that morning, and carried it with her. The back of the library was cooler than the reading room. The reference shelves rose tall and still, filled with dictionaries, atlases, town records, old directories, and heavy books that seemed to exist mostly to reassure people that knowledge could have weight. The local history cabinet stood against the wall, its glass front reflecting Elena. She passed. She stopped before the office door. The wood was darker than she remembered. Not changed, perhaps, but aged by years of being unseen. The grain ran in long vertical lines. Small brass name plate remained fixed at eye level. Miss Arthurvale, head librarian. Elena had never removed it. She had told herself this because it was difficult to unscrew and might damage the wood. Now, standing before it, she knew that was not the reason. She touched the nameplate lightly. "Hello, Papa," she whispered. The words surprised her. They had not been planned, and because of that, they were true. For a moment, nothing happened. Then somewhere behind her, in the reading room, a page turned. Elena closed her fingers around the brass handle. It was cold at first, then warmed under her palm. The door opened with a soft, dry sound. The room beyond smelled of dust, not the warm, reviving dust of books in use, but the neglected dust of corners and boxes and curtains left closed too long. Elena stood on the threshold, letting her eyes adjust. The office was dim. Haylight entered through the single window, softened by rain, and the old curtain that had half slipped from one ring. Boxes filled most of the floor, or more than Elena remembered. Stacks of town newsletters, a crate of broken bookends, a rolled rug, 2 lamps without shades, a bundle of walking sticks left behind by patrons, and never reclaimed. The cracked globe stood near the desk, tilted sadly toward an ocean no one had looked at in years. The desk itself was barely visible beneath old files and folded cloth, but the green armchair remained by the window. It was faded now. Dust lay along its arms, and cushion had sagged slightly. It was still there, turned toward the room as if waiting for a young girl to climb into it with a book and disappear somewhere else. Elena stepped inside. The floorboard near the door creaked in the same place it always had. She almost stepped around it out of habit. Then she smiled faintly and let it creak. The sound moved through the room like a small acknowledgment. She set the Book of Rainy Doors on the desk and began opening the curtains. Dust lifted into the gray light. The window looked out onto the narrow garden behind the library. It was not a formal garden, only a strip of wet earth bordered by old stone, with a bench, a laurel bush, and a row of stubborn herbs that returned each year despite neglect. Rain stippled the soil. A robin stood beneath the bench, round and solemn. Elena opened the window an inch. Cool air entered. The room breathed. For the next hour, she worked slowly, not efficiently, not with her usual brisk certainty. She did not attempt to transform the whole room at once. She moved one box, then another. She stacked old newsletters by year. She dusted the windowsill. She carried the broken bookends to a crate for repair. She removed 3 empty jars, a cracked saucer, and a bundle of curtain hooks from a drawer. Every object seemed to ask for a decision. Keep, move, mend, let go. Elena found this unexpectedly tiring. Not because the work was hard, but because each small thing had weight beyond itself. A fountain pen was no ink. Her father's old library stamp, the rubber worn soft at the edges. A folded program from a children's reading afternoon where she had, at age 11, read a poem far too quickly, and then hidden in this very office, until her father brought her tea with too much milk. She found the peppermint tin in the top drawer. It was blue, with a painted ship on the lid. For a moment, she simply looked at it. Then she opened it. Inside were 3 peppermint sweets, pale and dusty, wrapped in twisted paper. Elena laughed once, very softly, and then, just as softly, she cried. There was no storm in it, no great breaking, only a few quiet tears that had waited a very long time for a room in which they could fall. She sat in the green armchair and held the tin in both hands. Outside the window, rain moved through the laurel leaves. The library carried on around her. Somewhere beyond the door, a chair scraped. Someone coughed politely. A reader crossed the floorboards. The world did not stop, because Elena had opened an old tin and found 3 sweets inside. This comforted her more than she expected. After a while, she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and laughed again, because her father had always kept a clean handkerchief in the second drawer, and would have been appalled by such poor planning. She opened the second drawer. There was the handkerchief, folded, white, embroidered at one corner with the initials A.V. Elena pressed it to her face. It smelled only faintly of linen and cedar now. The pipe tobacco scent was gone. The peppermint scent, too. Time had done its quiet work, but the handkerchief was still soft. "Thank you," she whispered. She did not know exactly whom she was thanking. Her father, the room, the rain, the bookshop, perhaps all of them. When she was ready, Elena stood and continued sorting. Near the back of the desk, beneath a stack of old acquisition forms, she found a leather-bound notebook, with small, brown, and tied with a thin cord. On the front, in her father's handwriting, were the words, "Readers who found their way." Elena sat down again. She untied the cord. The first pages were filled with names, not full records, not borrowing histories, just names, dates, and short notes. Margaret Harlow, March Rain, came for roses, left with courage. Peter Bellamy, First Frost, insisted he hated poetry, borrowed 3 volumes. Daniel Pike, Summer Heat, chose maps again, not ready to travel, but ready to imagine. Elena turned the pages slowly. Her father had kept notes on readers, not intrusive ones, not private details, gentle observations, tiny reminders of what each person had needed, what book had helped, what season they had come in carrying around them. There were hundreds. Some names Lena knew. Some belonged to people long gone. Some were marked only by description. The woman in the brown coat who cried over the bird book. Boy with red scarf, afraid of storms, send him toward gentle adventures. Old sailor, hands shaking, wanted sea stories without shipwrecks. Elena smiled through the ache in her chest. Her father had done what she did. Or perhaps she had learned it from him so deeply that she had forgotten it had been learned. She turned another page and stopped. Near the end of the notebook was her own name, Elena. Rainy season, age 14, says she wants to read every book in the library. Told her this was impractical. She replied that I should buy more shelves. Below it, another note. Elena, winter, age 19. Asked if ordinary lives can still be adventurous. Gave her The River Beyond the Orchard. She stayed up all night reading. Elena remembered that book. A quiet novel about a woman who never left her village, but learned every bend of the river beside it, until she knew more of travel than many who crossed oceans. Elena had loved it, fiercely, and then forgotten it, as people sometimes forget the books that help form them, because those books become part of the structure of who they are. She turned the page. There was one final note. It had no date. Elena will be a fine librarian. She knows that books are not escapes from life, but bridges back into it. I hope she remembers to cross them herself." Elena closed her eyes. The rain whispered. For a long while she sat with the notebook open in her lap. The words did not hurt exactly. They entered gently, which was almost harder, like warm water poured over cold hands. She had remembered so many things about her father. His voice, his keys, his handwriting, the way he hummed under his breath while repairing books, the way he never rushed a reader who was pretending not to need help. But she had forgotten that he saw her, not only as his daughter, not only as the girl in the green chair, but as someone who would one day stand where he had stood, holding doors open for others, and hoping, quietly, that she would not forget to enter too. A soft sound came from the desk. Lena looked up. The Book of Rainy Doors had opened. No wind moved in the room. The window was only cracked. Yet the pages had turned to a place near the center, where silver writing shone faintly in the dim light. Elena stood and went to it. The page held a single paragraph. Some rooms become locked, not because a key is turned, but because love once lived there, and left its shape behind. Enter gently. Do not demand the room become what it was. Let it become what it can be. Below the paragraph was a drawing, a simple line drawing of a door. Not the green door of the bookshop, not the office door. A smaller door, narrow and arched, with 3 drops of rain above it. Elena traced the drawing with her eyes. Then she noticed something behind the desk. At first, she thought it was only a shadow between the filing cabinet and the wall. But as she moved closer, she saw the edge of a wooden panel she had never noticed before. It was half hidden behind a stack of rolled posters and an old coat stand. She moved the posters, then the coat stand. There, set low into the wall, was a small arched cupboard door. It was no higher than her waist. The wood was the same dark oak as the shelves, and perhaps that was why she had never seen it. Or perhaps, she thought, some doors waited until the hand reaching for them had grown tired of pretending it was not reaching. The little door had a brass knob. Above it, carved faintly into the wood, were 3 raindrops. Helena's breath caught. For a moment she considered calling Mrs. Wren, which was ridiculous, because Mrs. Wren existed in a bookshop that did not exist by daylight. Then she considered closing the office door and returning later. Then she considered pretending she had not seen it. Instead, she knelt. The brass knob turned easily. Inside was not a passageway, or a hidden staircase, or a tunnel into another world. It was a cupboard, a small, ordinary cupboard lined with cedar, and inside it were books, not many, perhaps 20, arranged into careful rows. Each was wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Each had a small label in her father's handwriting. Elena took out the first. For the day Elena doubts her own gentleness. She sat back on her heels. The rain seemed to grow softer. She touched the next label, for when the library feels too heavy, and the next, for when she forgets that wonder is not childish, and the next, for a winter evening, when she needs to laugh quietly, and the next, for when I am no longer here to recommend something. Elena covered her mouth with one hand. The room blurred. She had thought the office held old work, old grief, old things without urgency. She had not known it held this. A shelf of books chosen for her, waiting, patiently, through years of rain and dust, and locked away memory. Her father had made her a library within the library, a little hidden collection, for the version of his daughter he trusted would one day need it. Elena sat on the floor beside the small cupboard, and let herself cry properly this time. Still softly, because the library was open, and there were readers nearby, but without stopping herself. Tears moved down her cheeks. She held the nearest wrapped book in her lap, the string pressed lightly into her palm. She did not open it yet. It was enough to know it was there. After a while, there was a gentle knock on the office door. Elena quickly wiped her face with the embroidered handkerchief. Yes, the door opened a little, and Mrs. Harlow peered in. "Oh, my dear," she said softly, "I wondered if you were quite all right. Mr. Bellamy has fallen asleep on the newspaper again, so nothing urgent is happening." Elena laughed through the last of her tears. "I am all right. Truly." Mrs. Harlowe's eyes moved around the room, taking in the dust, the boxes, the open drawers, the old green chair. "I have not been in here in years," she said. "Neither have I, properly." Mrs. Harlowe nodded, as if this explained everything. She did not ask more, which Elena appreciated. "I remember your father sitting at that desk," she said. "He once gave me a book about ferns, when I asked for roses." Helena smiled. "Did you mind?" "Not at all. It was exactly what I needed, though I did not know that until page 42. She looked at the wrapped book in Elena's lap. "Still recommending, is he?" Elena held the book gently. "Yes," she said. "It seems so." Mrs. Harlowe's expression warmed. "Well then, I will leave you with him." She closed the door softly. Elena stayed on the floor for a little longer, listening to the ordinary life of the library on the other side of the wall. Not everything lost is gone forever, she thought. Some things are waiting in cupboards, some in notebooks, some in rooms we have mistaken for storage. She looked at the label on the book in her lap. "For when I am no longer here to recommend something." Her fingers worked slowly at the string. The knot was loose, as if tied by someone who wanted it to be opened without struggle. The brown paper unfolded with a dry, tender whisper. Inside was a small hardback book bound in deep green cloth. Its title was stamped in gold. The house at the end of the Reine Elena did not know the book. She had never seen it in the library catalogue, ever ordered it, never shelved it, never recommended it. She opened the cover. On the inside page, her father had written, "For my Elena, when the weather is long and the way forward feels hidden. Some houses are found by walking, some by waiting, some by finally coming in from the rain." Elena held the book against her heart. The library bell rang faintly at the front desk as someone entered. The sound brought her back gently. She could not read it now, not fully. There was work to do, readers to help, the day still unfolding. But the book had waited years. It could wait a few more hours. She rewrapped it loosely, not hiding it, only holding it together. Then she placed it on a desk beside the Book of Rainy Doors, and returned the other wrapped volumes carefully to the cedar cupboard, one by one. For doubt, for heaviness, for wonder, for laughter, for winter, for courage, for endings, for beginnings. When the cupboard was closed again, Elena did not feel the need to hide it behind posters and coat stands. She left the small arched door visible, and this began clearing the office in earnest, not to erase what it had been, to let it become what it could be. She moved the old boxes into neat stacks. She opened the window wider. She dusted the desk, polished the brass lamp, and carried out the broken things that could not be mended. She placed the cracked globe on a shelf, turning it so the blue ocean faced the room. At 4 o'clock, when the light was already fading and the rain had deepened again, Elena made a new sign on a piece of cream card. She wrote carefully in dark ink, "Quiet reading room. Please enter gently." She stood looking at it for some time. Then she pinned it to the outside of her father's old office door. No, not only her father's office now. The quiet reading room. The first person to use it was Daniel Pike. He came to the desk at 4:30 with a travel memoir in one hand and an uncertain look on his face. "Elena," he said, "may I ask something odd?" "Always." He glanced toward the back shelves. "That little room. Is it open?" Elena looked toward the office door. The sign hung there, still and simple. "Yes," she said, "it is. I only wondered because." He shifted the book from one hand to the other. "It looks peaceful. It is. Would it be all right if I sat there for a while, just to read a chapter before going home?" Elena felt something quiet and warm move through her. Of course. Daniel nodded gratefully and made his way to the back of the library. From the desk, Elena watched him enter the room. He did not know what the room had been. Not fully. He did not know about the notebook, the peppermint tin, the green chair, or the books waiting in the cedar cupboard. He only knew that a door had opened and a quiet place was available. Perhaps that was enough. Perhaps that was what libraries were always doing, in their humble, ordinary way. opening rooms, offering chairs, keeping lamps lit. By closing time, 3 more readers had used the quiet room. Mrs. Harlow sat there with a book about moss. A young mother nursed her baby in the green chair and looked so relieved to be somewhere softly private that Lena pretended not to notice her tears. Mr. Bellamy stood in the doorway for several minutes, declared the room rather dusty, but tolerable, and later returned with a book of poems he claimed to have picked up by mistake. When the last reader left, and the library doors were locked, Elena returned to the quiet room alone. The desk lamp glowed warmly. Rain tapped on the window. The green chair waited. On the desk lay the book of Rainy Doors and House at the End of the Rain. Elena sat in her father's old chair. Not the green armchair by the window, but the desk chair. The one that had once felt too large. It still felt large, but not impossibly so. She placed her hands flat on the desk and let the room settle around her. Then she opened the book of Rainy Doors. The silver writing had changed. You entered gently. Below it, another line appeared. Now bring back only yourself. Elena smiled. She understood a little more now. Not everything. Not the rain-bound bookshop. Not Mrs. Wren. Not the way books appeared, changed, waited, and returned. Not why a shop across the street had chosen this season, this rain, this version of her. But she understood this. The bookshop had not appeared because she was broken. It had appeared because she had been standing too long at the doorway of her own life, holding it open for everyone else. And some kind thing, somewhere, had decided to hold one open for her. At midnight, the rain was still falling. Elena did not watch from upstairs this time. She remained in the quiet reading room with a lamp burning low, a cup of tea beside her, and her father's book open in her hands. She had read only the first chapter. It was about a woman walking through rain toward a house she had once known, but could not find again. The writing was gentle and old-fashioned. The pages smelled faintly of cedar. There was nothing extraordinary in it yet. Yet Helena felt as if every sentence had been placed carefully along a path. At 12, the church clock struck. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 12. Elena listened. For a moment, there was only rain. Then from somewhere across the street, the brass bell rang, clear, delicate, waiting. Elena closed the house at the end of the rain. Leaving a ribbon in its place, she put on her coat. Before leaving, she looked once more around the quiet reading room. The green chair, the polished desk, the little cedar cupboard, the sign on the door. The room was not what it had been when she was a girl. It was not what it had been when grief first made it impossible. It was something else now, something still becoming. Elena turned down the lamp. "Good night, Papa," she said softly. Then she went out into the rain. The rain-bound bookshop stood between the apothecary and the blue house, warm and green-doored, its windows glowing with amber light. The sign swayed gently above the entrance, open when needed, closed when found. Elena crossed the lane without hurrying. The door opened before she knocked. The brass bell rang above her. Inside, Mrs. Wren looked up from the counter. "Well," she said, smiling as if Elena had returned from a long but pleasant walk, "you found the first door." Elena took off her wet scarf. "I think it found me. Most good doors do." The cat lifted its head from a stack of dictionaries and gave Elena a slow blink. Mrs. Wren poured tea without asking. Tonight the shop seemed warmer than before. The lamps burned low and golden. Rain glittered on the dark windows. A faint scent of cinnamon drifted through the air. Somewhere in the back, a ladder rolled softly along its rail, though no one stood on it. Elena sat at the round table. Mrs. Wren placed a cup before her. "Tell me," she said. So Elena did. She told her about the office, about the dust, the curtain, the peppermint tin, the notebook. She told her about the hidden cupboard and the wrapped books. She told her about her father's final note, and how the room had become a quiet reading room a late afternoon without her quite planning it. Mrs. Wren listened, the way rain listens to rooftops, fully, softly, without interruption. When Elena finished, the old woman nodded. "A very good door," she said. Elena looked down at her tea. "I thought opening it would hurt more. Did it hurt?" Yes, and Elena considered, and it made room. Mrs. Wren's eyes warmed. That is often how it goes. Elena glanced toward the shelves. The signs had shifted again. Tonight, they read, for rooms that remember, for daughters of quiet men, for when dusk becomes a doorway, for books left by those who loved us. Elena shook her head softly. Your cataloging is very personal. The shop has strong opinions. It would be impossible to maintain alphabetically. Quite. For a little while they sat in companionable quiet. Elena found she liked Mrs. Wren's silences. They did not demand filling. They were like wide margins on a page, not empty, but giving the words somewhere to breathe. After a time, Elena asked, "Who was the shop for before me?" Mrs. Wren looked toward the rain-dark window. "Many people? Were you one of them?" The old woman's hand stilled on her teacup. "Only for a moment." "Yes," she said. Elena waited, but Mrs. Wren did not continue. It was the first time Elena had seen even the suggestion of a closed door in her. "You do not have to tell me," Elena said. Mrs. Wren looked back at her. Something like gratitude passed gently across her face. "Not tonight." The words were quiet, but they told Elena more than a longer answer might have. The shopkeeper had been found once too. Perhaps everyone inside the rain-bound bookshop had first entered as a reader. Perhaps even those who tended doors had once needed one opened. A book slid from a nearby shelf and landed softly on the table beside Elena's tea. She looked at it. Mrs. Wren raised an eyebrow, impatient. The book was small and bound in cream cloth. Its title appeared in dark green letters. The Catalogue of Unasked Questions. Elena opened it carefully. Most of the pages were blank. On the first page, a question was written. What do you want? When no one is asking what you can give. Elena closed the book at once. Mrs. Wren looked amused but said nothing. I'm not reading that yet, Elena said. Of course. It is a rude book. Some of the best are. Very gently. Elena rested one hand on the cover. The question remained with her even through the closed cloth. What do you want when no one is asking what you can give? She had no ready answer. For years, wanting had become tangled with usefulness. She wanted the library to thrive. She wanted readers to feel welcome. She wanted the town council not to cut the acquisitions budget. She wanted children to love books, lonely people to feel less lonely, old people to be remembered, and the roof above the east wing to stop leaking. All worthy wants, all true. But beneath them, quieter and less practiced, there were other wants she had not allowed into full sentences. She wanted to read without purpose. She wanted to walk in the rain without feeling she should be somewhere. She wanted a room that was hers and not only inherited. She wanted to be seen not merely as capable, but as still becoming. She wanted, perhaps, to be surprised. The thought made her tired in a gentle way. Mrs. Wren leaned back. That one can go home with you, too, when you are ready. How many books am I allowed to borrow? As many as you can carry honestly. What does that mean? You will know when one becomes too many. Elena gave her a librarianess look. Mrs. Wren smiled into her tea. Near the front of the shop, the door opened. The brass bell rang. A man stepped in, removing his soaped hat. He was middle-aged, with kind eyes and the air of someone who had been walking longer than intended. Elena recognized him after a moment. Daniel Pike. He looked around the bookshop with wide, uncertain eyes. Then he saw Elena. Elena. She stood so abruptly her chair gave a small scrape. Daniel. He looked embarrassed, relieved, and deeply confused. I was walking home, he said. Only I turned down Bell Lane and this was here. Mrs. Wren rose. Good evening, Mr. Pike. Daniel blinked. You know me. Tea. He looked at Elena, who found herself smiling. You should say yes, she told him. The tea helps. Daniel removed his coat slowly, as though still expecting the shop to vanish if he moved too quickly. I do not understand, he said. No, Elena replied, feeling the strange comfort of echoing Mrs. Wren's words. But he came anyway. Mrs. Wren's eyes twinkled. Daniel was guided to a chair near a shelf labeled, For Journeys Not Yet Taken. Elena watched as a book slid gently from the shelf into his waiting hands. Its cover was the color of the sea under cloud. Daniel sat. He opened it, and the expression on his face changed. Not dramatically. Nothing in the rain-bound shop seemed to happen dramatically. His shoulders lowered, and the tense line of his mouth softened. He looked, for the first time in all the years Elena had known him, like a man who had found a road that did not require him to leave before he was ready. Elena sat again. Mrs. and returned to the table. The shop found him tonight, Elena said softly. Yes, because he is lost. Quietly. Elena watched Daniel turn a page. He always borrows travel books, and never travels. Not far. Perhaps he has been traveling in the only way he could manage. Lena considered this. It was easy, even kindly, to decide what someone else needed. She had thought Daniel needed courage to leave. Perhaps he had needed permission to stay, until the leaving became true, or unnecessary, or something else entirely. The rain-bound bookshop was teaching her that the right book did not always push a person forward. Sometimes it sat beside them until forward became less frightening. The rain deepened outside. The bookshop settled around its readers. Daniel read. The boy with the enormous book peered again beneath the table, now wearing dry socks that did not match. A woman Elena did not know sat near the window, holding a recipe book and crying quietly over a page that seemed to comfort her. The smoke-colored cat moved from dictionary stack to counter, from counter to chair, from chair to Daniel's lap, where it settled with the authority of a creature who recognized a reader in need of extra weight. The hours softened. At some point, Elena opened the catalogue of unasked questions again. The first question remained. What do you want, when no one is asking what you can give? This time, Elena did not close the book. She turned the page. The second question read, What did you love before you became useful? Elena stared at it. The answer came more easily than she expected. She loved maps of imaginary places, not practical maps, not town plans or railway routes or sensible diagrams of roads. She loved maps in the front of novels, forests with names no one had spoken aloud before, rivers that curved around kingdoms, mountains drawn like sleeping animals, little dotted paths leading to places that promised danger in the story but safety in the reading. She used to copy them into notebooks. Sometimes she invented her own. She had forgotten that. No, not forgotten. Stored away, like the office, like the green chair, like the books in a cedar cupboard. Elena turned another page. What might you love again, if you began quietly? She looked up. On a nearby shelf, a roll of parchment shifted, then another, then a narrow wooden box appeared between two stacks of books, where she was certain no box had been before. Mrs. Wren said nothing. Elena reached for it. Inside were map-making tools, a small compass, a tin of colored pencils, a folded packet of thick paper, a ruler made of dark wood, a tiny bottle of ink, the color of rain clouds, and a note, not in Mrs. Wren's hand, not in her father's, in writing she did not recognize. For the places you have not stopped imagining. Elena touched the colored pencils. Something light, almost shy, moved inside her. She had spent so long guiding other people into stories that she had forgotten she was allowed to make doors of her own. Not for publication, not for usefulness, not for a program or a display or a library event, only because once, long ago, a girl in a green chair had loved drawing rivers that went nowhere real. She closed the box carefully. May I borrow this too? She asked. Mrs. Wren's smile was very small and very knowing. As long as you can carry it honestly. Elena looked at the blue-black book of rainy doors, the cream catalogue of unasked questions, the green book from her father, and the small box of map-making tools. It was a lot, but not too much. Not tonight. At the edge of the room, Daniel closed his book and held it against his chest. He looked toward Elena. There is a station, he said softly. In the book? He nodded. A little station by the sea. Train does not leave until the traveler is ready. It just waits with the doors open. Lena smiled. That sounds like a kind station. Daniel looked down at the cover. I think I might go somewhere. he said. Not far. Perhaps the coast. That would be nice. Or perhaps I will just read about it first. That would also be nice. He seemed relieved. Mrs. Wren brought him brown paper and string. Take it with you, she said. Daniel looked startled. May I? The book seems to think so. He did not argue. The shop began to grow quieter near 2 o'clock. Readers left one by one, stepping out into rain that would lead each of them back to whatever street, town, memory, or threshold they had come from. Daniel left with his book beneath his coat and the cat hair still visible on his sleeve. The boy with the enormous book fell asleep beneath the table and was gently covered with a knitted blanket by Mrs. Wren, who seemed unsurprised by this. Elena lingered. She was not avoiding leaving. She simply liked being there. At last, Mrs. Wren came to sit across from her. You have had a full day. Yes. A room opened. A book returned. A question arrived. A map began. Elena smiled. When you say it like that, it sounds less like a Thursday. Most Thursdays are underestimated. The rain moved softly against the glass. Elena looked at Mrs. Wren. Will there be more doors? Yes. Do I need to find them all? No. That answer surprised her. Mrs. Wren continued. The point of doors is not to spend life opening every one, only to learn which ones are yours, and which are meant simply to be passed with gratitude. Elena let that settle. It was a restful thought. She had spent many years feeling responsible for every door, every reader, every need, every quiet ache that entered the library wearing a damp coat and pretending to ask only for a book. Perhaps she could care without carrying everything. Perhaps she could open some doors and let others remain peacefully closed. When Elena finally stood to leave, Mrs. Wren wrapped the map-making box in brown paper. The catalogue of unasked questions slid itself under the string without being asked, which Elena chose not to comment on. The Book of Rainy Doors she carried openly. Her father's green book remained close beneath her coat. At the door she paused. Mrs. Wren? Yes, dear? Thank you. The old woman's face softened. Do not thank me too soon. Some books are kind in inconvenient ways. Lena laughed quietly. The brass bell rang as she stepped into the rain. The street outside was silver and empty. The apothecary slept. The blue house leaned. The library windows across the lane were dark, except for one faint lamp Elena had left burning in the new quiet reading room. She turned back. The rain-bound bookshop glowed behind her. In the window, Mrs. Wren lifted a hand. Beside her, on the counter, the smoke-colored cat opened one eye. Then the church clock struck 2. The rain thickened briefly, passing between Elena and the shop like a curtain, and cleared. There was only the blank wall. Elena stood for a moment beneath her umbrella, holding more books than she had carried for herself in years. Not too many. Just enough. She crossed the street, let herself into the library. The building welcomed her with its familiar hush. Upstairs, the flat waited. But Elena did not go up immediately. Instead, she returned to the quiet reading room, lit the desk lamp, and placed the brown paper parcel on the desk. She opened the map-making box and laid out the pencils, the compass, the ink, the thick-folded paper. For a while, she simply looked at them. Then she took one sheet of paper and smoothed it flat. She did not try to draw anything useful. She began with a line, a road perhaps, or a river, or a path made by rainwater between stones. It curved gently across the page. At one end, she drew a small square building with a green door. At the other, a room with a window, a chair, and a cupboard full of waiting books. Between them, she drew the narrow old street, the apothecary, the blue house, the library, and the blank wall that was not always blank. Then, almost without thinking, she wrote at the top, a map of doors that open kindly. The rain tapped the window. A lamp burned low. Elena added 3 tiny raindrops above the green door. Then she sat back, tired in the best way. Outside, the town slept under rain. Inside, the library held its books, its rooms, its soft corners of lamplight. And across the street, whether visible or not, the rain-bound bookshop waited within the weather, ready for the next quietly lost soul who might hear a brass bell after midnight and wonder, just for a moment, whether the rain had opened a door. Part 4. A Map of Kindly Doors. By morning, the rain had become part of the town's breathing. It did not fall heavily. It did not hurry down the gutters or drum against the roof. It simply remained, fine and steady, a silver stitching between sky and stone, softened the outlines of chimneys, and curled around the library windows in pale ribbons. It gathered in the hollows of the cobbled street, and made every lamppost, every shop sign, every passing figure appear twice, once in the world and once in the water. Elena woke in the quiet reading room with her cheek resting against her folded arm. For a moment she did not know where she was. Then she saw the desk lamp, burned low but still glowing. She saw the green armchair near the window, the small cedar cupboard set into the wall, and the map spread beneath her hand. A map of doors that opened kindly. She sat up slowly. Her neck was stiff, and one side of her face felt creased from her sleeve, but there was a gentle warmth in her chest, the kind that came after a long sleep beside a fire. She had not meant to fall asleep there. She remembered drawing the first road, then the bookshop, then the library, then the little office with the green chair. After that she had added lines, 3 rooftops, a tiny bell above a green door, and a narrow path that did not seem to belong to any real lane in town. The path curved from the back garden of the library toward the edge of the page. She did not remember drawing it. Elena leaned closer. The line was faint, made in soft gray pencil. It left the library garden, crossed behind the laurel bush, passed beneath an arch she had never seen, and ended at a small square marked only with a cup of tea. Beside it, in handwriting not her own, were the words, "For those who need to sit before they speak." Elena stared at the sentence. Then she looked toward the map-making box. The gray pencil lay neatly beside the paper. She touched it. It was cool. "Well," she whispered, "that is new." The library, for once, had no answer. Outside the office window, dawn had barely arrived. The narrow garden lay damp and dim, its herbs bowed under the rain. The laurel bush shivered softly. Beyond the wall, the backs of old buildings rose in shadow, her windows shuttered, their chimneys breathing thin threads of smoke. Helena folded her arms on the desk and studied the map. It had changed in the night. Not dramatically, not enough for someone else to notice, perhaps, but she knew what she had drawn and what she had not. The new path seemed to lead out of the library, yet not into any street she recognized. It was neither threatening nor urgent. It looked like an invitation written in pencil. She turned the map gently toward the lamp. The little square with the cup of tea had been drawn with care. A roof line, a chimney, a round window. Beside it stood a tree with a bench beneath it. The shape stirred some old memory, but not one she could place. Elena reached for the catalogue of unasked questions. It had been resting beside the map, closed under its cream cloth cover. When she opened it, the first 2 questions remained. What do you want, when no one is asking what you can give? What did you love before you became useful? Below them, a 3rd question had appeared. Where would you go if no one needed you for 1 quiet hour? Elena read it twice. The answer did not arrive as a word. It arrived as a feeling. A chair by a window, a cup of tea, the sound of rain falling somewhere beyond responsibility. She closed the book and looked again at the map. The little path waited. Not now, she told it softly. The pencil line did not object. That was one of the kind things about these mysteries. Elena was beginning to learn. They did not chase. They did not demand. They simply waited with a patience that made ordinary urgency seem almost impolite. She stood, stretched, and began preparing the library for the day. The quiet reading room no longer felt like a sealed memory. It had become something alive overnight. The desk was polished. The lamp glowed warmly. The green chair looked less abandoned, with a folded blanket over its arm. The cedar cupboard remained closed, but no longer hidden. Her father's notebook lay on the shelf, beside the cracked globe, and the little peppermint tin sat near the window, not as a shrine, but as a small blue reminder. Elena carried the map upstairs, pressed it beneath a heavy atlas to keep it flat, washed her face, changed into a clean dress, and made strong tea. By 7:45, she was at the front door with the keys in her hand. The street outside was empty except for the rain. Across the lane, between the apothecary and the blue house, the wall was blank. Elena looked at it for only a moment. Then she unlocked the library. The morning unfolded gently. Mr. Bellamy arrived at 8 with a complaint about his left knee, the dampness, and the state of public punctuation. Mrs. Harlow returned the book on moss and borrowed one about lichen, which Elena considered progress. The young mother from the previous day came in with her baby and asked, very quietly, whether the little room at the back might be open again. "It is," Elena said. The woman's face softened with relief. "I will not be long. There is no hurry." The woman looked as if she might cry again, but instead smiled and disappeared toward the quiet reading room. By mid-morning, 3 people had asked to sit there. By noon, Lena had placed a second chair inside. I, too, she added a small side table, a lamp with a green shade, and a little card that read, "You may stay as long as you need." She had meant it for the room, but as she set it down, she wondered if it was also something she had needed to hear. Near 3 o'clock, Daniel Pike entered the library. He stood just inside the door for a few seconds, rainwater shining on his coat, a wrapped book held carefully beneath one arm. Lena looked up from sorting returns. "Good afternoon, Daniel." "Good afternoon." His voice was quieter than usual, but clearer somehow. Ab brought this back. He crossed to the desk and placed the book before her. It was the one from the rain-bound bookshop. The sea-colored cover looked ordinary in daylight, though not quite. It had the faint depth of water beneath cloud. There was no title on the front, only a small silver-lined drawing of a railway station beside the sea. Elena rested her hand on it. "Are you finished?" Daniel considered. "I do not think finished is the right word." "No?" He shook his head. "I think I have read enough for now." Elena smiled. "That sounds like a very rain-bound answer." Daniel looked relieved that she understood. Behind him, Mr. Bellamy rustled his newspaper too loudly, perhaps to indicate that he was not listening, which almost certainly meant he was. Daniel leaned a little closer. "Did it happen to you, too?" Elena met his eyes. "The bookshop?" He nodded. "Yes." Daniel let out a slow breath. "I thought perhaps I had fallen asleep while walking, or that I would taken a wrong turn in the rain. But I woke this morning with the book on my table and cat hair on my sleeve. The cat is persuasive evidence." "That is what I thought." Elena looked down at the sea-colored book. "May I ask what it was?" Daniel touched the cover lightly. "It was called The Station That Waited by the Sea. It was about a man who bought a ticket every year and never boarded the train. At first, I thought the story would teach him to leave, but it did not. Not exactly." "What did it teach him?" Daniel's expression shifted, becoming thoughtful and soft. "That waiting and avoiding are not the same thing, and that staying can be a choice, if you are awake while choosing it." Elena was quiet. Daniel looked toward the travel section. "I have spent years telling myself I would travel one day. Then I felt ashamed that I had not. So I borrowed books about other people's journeys and pretended that was either preparation or failure, depending on my mood. And now I think I might take the train to the coast next month, just for a day. Not because I must finally become someone adventurous, only because I would like to see the sea in winter." Elena smiled. "That seems like a good reason." Daniel nodded. "Yes, it does." He looked lighter, though not transformed in any grand way. His coat was still damp. His hair still fell into his eyes. He still carried himself like a man apologizing slightly to the furniture around him. But something had shifted. A small permission had entered him. Elena wondered how many people in town were walking around with books from the rain-bound bookshop under their coats, quietly becoming more themselves. "Will it come back tonight?" Daniel asked. "The shop? Yes. Perhaps." He gave a small laugh. "That means you do not know. It means Mrs. Wren has infected me with her way of answering." "Mrs. Wren," repeated. "The woman with the spectacles?" "Yes. I liked her. Most people do, I think." Daniel hesitated. "Do we tell anyone?" Elena looked toward the window, where rain blurred the street into streaks of gray and amber. "I do not know." It was an honest answer. Part of her wanted to tell everyone, to stand in the square and announce that there was a bookshop hidden in the rain, that it opened after midnight, that it held books for tired hearts and shelves labeled with impossible tenderness. But she knew, even as the thought came, that this would not work. Some places could not be brought into daylight by insistence. Some doors opened only under the right weather, the right hour, the right kind of quiet. "Maybe people find it when they need it," Daniel said. "Yes," Elena replied. "And maybe our part is only to believe them if they do." Daniel seemed satisfied with that. He left the sea-colored book on the desk. As he turned to go, the book gave a soft sigh. Elena looked down. Daniel did too. The cover had opened slightly. Inside the front page, a line of handwriting appeared. "Returned with gratitude. Needed again, perhaps, but not today." Daniel's eyes widened. Then he smiled, slowly and completely. "Goodbye, then," he said to the book. The book closed. Bellamy made a noise behind his newspaper that sounded suspiciously like a swallowed chuckle. Daniel left the library with his hands in his pockets, walking a little slower than usual, not because he was uncertain, but because he no longer seemed to be rushing past the idea of himself. Elena carried the sea-colored book to the quiet reading room. She did not know why, but it seemed right. She placed it on the desk beside her father's notebook. The moment she did, the book vanished, not in a flash, not with a sound. It simply became less there, like mist thinning under morning light, until only a faint scent of salt and rain remained. Elena stood with one hand still resting where the book had been. Then she laughed softly. The rain-bound bookshop, it seemed, had its own return system, far superior to overdue notices. The afternoon became slow and golden gray. Rain softened. The fire burned. Readers drifted in and out. Elena helped the man find a book on repairing window latches, then guided a schoolgirl toward a gentle biography of a painter, then spent 20 minutes searching for a misplaced volume of local poems that eventually turned up in the gardening section, where Mr. Bellamy claimed it must have gone for fresh air. At closing time, Elena felt tired, not emptied. This was new. There were different kinds of tiredness, she was discovering. There was the tiredness of being used up, and the tiredness of having lived a day with some honest part of yourself awake. The first made the world feel heavier. The second made rest feel earned and near. After locking the front doors, she returned to the quiet reading room. The map was still upstairs under the atlas, but she could feel it in her mind. The little gray path leading from the library garden to the square marked with a cup of tea. Where would you go if no one needed you for one quiet hour? She looked around the room. The answer was no longer only a place. It was a permission. She went upstairs, made a small supper, and set the map on the kitchen table beside her bowl of soup. The gray path seemed a little darker now, easier to see. At its end, the tiny cup of tea had gained a curl of steam. Elena ate slowly, watching it. At 11:30, the rain returned with quiet confidence. It moved across the town in soft diagonal lines, tapping the windows, filling the gutters, whispering along the slates. The church clock stood blurred in the dark. The apothecary sign swung once, then settled. Elena put on her coat. She took the book of rainy doors, the catalogue of unasked questions, and the map-making box. Then, after a moment's thought, she took the map as well, rolling it carefully and tying it with a ribbon. When the clock struck midnight, the brass bell sounded almost at once, clear, delicate, familiar now. Elena smiled. Across the lane, the rain-bound bookshop glowed warmly, between the apothecary and the blue house, its windows bright with lamplight, its green door shining with rain. She crossed the street and entered. The bell rang above her. Mrs. Wren was not behind the counter. Instead, a smoke-colored cat sat there alone, upright and solemn, as if temporarily in charge. It blinked at Elena, then looked toward the back of the shop. "I see," Elena said. The cat jumped down and walked away between two shelves. Elena followed. The bookshop had changed again. Tonight, the shelves seemed taller and more widely spaced, forming long, quiet avenues lit by lamps that hung like moons. The air smelled of cedar, rain, and steeped black tea. Small rugs lay scattered over the floorboards. Books rested on tables, windowsills, chairs, and in one case a ladder rung, where a red volume sat balanced as though waiting for someone with unusual reach. The signs above the shelves were new. 4 maps that began as feelings, 4 tea not yet poured, 4 questions best asked, while seated, for when the road is gentle, but unfamiliar. Elena held the rolled map a little tighter. The cat led her through a section of travel books, past a case of poetry, around a table covered in books about doors, and into a part of the shop she had not seen before. There, at the back, stood a door. Not the green front door. This one was narrow and arched, made of pale wood, with a small round window near the top. 3 raindrops had been carved above the frame. From beneath it came a warm line of light. Elena stopped. The cat sat beside the door and curled its tail around its feet. "Am I meant to open it?" Elena asked. The cat yawned. This, Elena decided, was not a helpful answer. From behind her, Mrs. Wren said, "Only if you would like an hour. No one has asked you for." Elena turned. Mrs. Wren stood at the end of the aisle holding 2 cups of tea. Tonight she wore a shawl the color of storm clouds, and had a pencil tucked behind one ear. "Is this from my map?" Elena asked, in the manner of speaking. "I drew part of it, but not all. Most true maps are collaborations." "With whom?" Mrs. Wren handed her a cup. "The place, the weather, the wanting, the hand holding the pencil. Sometimes the bookshop, if it is fooling opinionated." Elena looked at the arched door. "What is behind it?" "That depends on how honestly you drew the cup of tea." Elena almost laughed. "Of course it does." Mrs. Wren sipped her tea. "The door will not take you far." "How far?" "Far enough." The warm line of light beneath the door glowed softly. Elena thought of the quiet reading room, of Daniel returning his book, of the young mother sitting beneath the green lamp, of the endless small needs that made up a day. She loved those needs. She did. But for the first time she wondered what might happen if she set them down for 1 hour, and trusted that the world would not collapse without her holding every thread. She placed her teacup on a nearby shelf, where a book immediately shifted aside to make room. Then she opened the arched door. Inside was a small tea room. No, not inside. Beyond. The door did not open into the back of the bookshop, because no ordinary building could have held what lay beyond it. Elena found herself standing beneath a covered stone arcade while rain fell in a quiet courtyard. The sky above was dark, but the courtyard glowed with warm light from lanterns hung beneath the eaves. A round window looked out from a little building across the way. Beneath a tree in the center stood a bench and a small table set with a teapot. It was exactly like the drawing on her map. The air smelled of wet stone, black tea, and the clean green scent of leaves after rain. Mrs. Wren stepped through behind her, followed by the cat. "Welcome," she said, "to the marginal tea room." Elena looked back. The arched door remained open behind them, showing the shelves of the rain-bound bookshop on the other side. Warm, impossible, ordinary. "The marginal tea room?" Elena asked. 4 thoughts that do not fit into the main text. Elena smiled. "I like it. I thought you might." They walked across the courtyard under the covered arcade. Rain fell steadily into a little stone basin at the center, where it made soft overlapping circles. The tree above it was not one Elena recognized. Its leaves were dark and glossy, and from the branches hung tiny lanterns shaped like closed books. The table beneath the tree had 2 chairs. Mrs. Wren sat in one. Elena sat in the other. For a moment neither spoke. The silence here was different from the bookshop's silence. The bookshop was full of sleeping words, waiting pages, and the faint sense that every shelf was listening. The tea-room silence was more open. It did not listen. It simply allowed. Mrs. Wren poured tea. It was darker than the tea in the shop, fragrant with bergamot and something floral Elena could not name. "Where are we?" Elena asked. "In the margin?" Of what? Mrs. Wren smiled. That is a larger question than we need tonight. Elena wrapped both hands around the cup. The rain in the courtyard sounded like pages being brushed clean. I saw this place on the map, she said. Yes, but I've never been here. Not with your feet. Elena considered this. A little building across the courtyard had shelves visible through the round window. Not many, just a few, neatly arranged. Beside it, a sign hung under the eaves. Tea, quiet, no explanations. Before the second cup, Elena nodded toward it. That seems very specific. It is an important rule. Do you follow it? Rarely. The cat leapt onto the bench and tucked itself into a gray comma. For a while, Elena let herself do nothing. It was harder than expected. Her mind, accustomed to shells and readers and small tasks, kept reaching for something to hold. She noticed a leaf fallen on the stone, and almost sped to move it. She saw that one lantern had gone out, and wondered if she should relight it. She thought of the library roof, the return ledger, tomorrow's story hour, the town council letter unanswered on her desk. Then she noticed what she was doing, and smiled faintly. Mrs. Wren said nothing. Lena lifted her cup and drank. The tea was very good. The rain went on falling. Slowly, the tasks in her mind stopped raising their hands. The courtyard settled around her. The lanterns glowed. The basin received rain without needing to keep any of it. The stone beneath her feet was old and worn smooth. Somewhere nearby, though she could not see where, water moved through a hidden channel, with a sound like a small stream. Elena breathed in. For one quiet hour. No one needed her. And after the first uneasiness passed, she discovered that the hour did not feel empty. It felt spacious. Mrs. Wren poured the second cup. Nap, she said. You may ask. Elena looked at her. She had many questions, so many that they crowded together and became difficult to separate. What is the rain-bound bookshop? How long has it existed? Who chooses the books? Why rain? Why me? What happens when someone is found? Why do you tend it? What door brought you here? That last question rose above the others. But Elena remembered Mrs. Wren's face the night before when she had asked if the shopkeeper had once been found too. Tonight, Mrs. Wren had said. Perhaps tonight was still not the night, so Elena chose a different question. What does closed when found mean? Mrs. Wren looked pleased, as though Elena had chosen well. The sign, yes, open when needed, closed when found. Mrs. Wren gazed into the rain for a moment before answering. Means the shop appears while a person needs a door, but not forever. Once they have found what they came for, the shop closes to them. Elena felt a quiet unease. Forever? Not always. Need has seasons. Person may be found in one way and lost in another years later. But usually, when the book has done its work, the shop becomes only a story they are grateful to half believe. Elena looked down at her tea. So one day I will not be able to come back. One day you may not need to. The words were kind. They still hurt a little. Elena had known the bookshop only a few nights, and already the thought of losing it felt like hearing that a dear friend would one day move away. She looked across the courtyard at the rain falling into the stone basin. What if I want to come back anyway? Mrs. Wren nodded. Most do. What happens then? Usually they stand in the rain before a wall. Elena gave a soft, reluctant laugh. That sounds unkind. It can feel that way. But some doors would become prisons if they never closed. Elena let this settle. A place that appeared only when needed could not be held by wanting. That was part of its gift, part of its mercy. If the rain-bound bookshop stayed forever, perhaps one might stop returning to ordinary rooms, ordinary streets, ordinary bookshelves where magic was quieter but still present. Is that what happened to you? Elena asked before she could stop herself. Mrs. Wren did not answer at once. The rain filled the pause. Elena opened her mouth to apologize, but Mrs. Wren raised one gentle hand. It is all right. The old woman looked toward the little book-shaped lanterns hanging from the tree. I first found the shop when I was 23, she said. It was not in this town then. Or perhaps it was, in a way. The shop has never been overly concerned with geography. Luina listened. I had left home with great determination and very little wisdom. I wanted to become a writer. Or rather, I wanted to become the sort of person people imagined when they heard the word writer. Interesting, brilliant, difficult in attractive ways. I had a small room above a printmaker's shop, 3 dresses, 2 notebooks, and no patience at all. Lena smiled softly. Mrs. Renaissance held the faraway warmth of someone watching a younger self through rain. Rook constantly, badly, mostly. I was certain that if I did not become remarkable quickly, the world would close over me. Every rejection felt like a door slammed shut. Every silence felt personal. Then one rainy night, after receiving a letter that was not cruel but felt cruel because it was honest, I walked until I did not know the streets. And the shop prepared, yes. Oh, then it called itself the Lantern Shelf. The door was yellow. There was a man behind the counter named Mr. Vale. Elena's cup paused halfway to her lips. Vale? Mrs. Wren turned to her. Not your father, dear. Elena lowered the cup. No, of course not. But names echo strangely in bookshops. The rain moved softly around them. What book did it give you? Elena asked. Mrs. Wren smiled. A blank one. Elena laughed. Mrs. Wren joined her, softly. I was furious. I had come to a magical bookshop, though I did not yet believe it, and it gave me a book with no words. I thought it a very poor recommendation. What was it for? For listening. Mrs. Wren's voice grew quieter. I had been trying so hard to say something worth hearing that I had stopped hearing anything at all. A blank book asked me to copy one sound each day, not describe it beautifully, not turn it into art, only listen and write down what I heard. What did you write first? Rain on a tin roof. Elena smiled. And then, horse hooves, a spoon in a cup, a woman humming through the wall, the printmaker coughing, my own footsteps when I was not rushing, a page turning in the room where no one expected anything from me. She looked down at her hands. That book saved me from the kind of ambition that would have made me unbearable to myself. Elena held her tea close. How did you become the shopkeeper? Mrs. Wren was quiet. The cat opened one eye, as if this part of the story mattered. That took longer, Mrs. Wren said. Years. Many returns. Many doors. Many attempts to hold on after I was meant to let go. Eventually, the shop stopped appearing for me. I was angry, then bereft, then, slowly, grateful. But you came back, yes, not as a reader, as someone who had learned to tend. How, Mrs. Wren smiled, but there was mystery in it again. That is another door. Helena knew not to push. Instead, she looked around the marginal tea-room, the wet stones, the rain basin, the warm lanterns, the little building with the round window. A place for thoughts that did not fit into the main text. It seemed exactly the sort of place where Mrs. Wren's story would rest until ready. I'm glad you found it, Elena said. So am I. He sat quietly. The rain fell. After a while, Mrs. Wren said, Your map will change. Elena glanced at the rolled paper beside her cup. On its own? Partly. But also because you will. What am I meant to do with it? Does one usually do with a map? Follow it. Sometimes. What else? Mrs. Wren's eyes were kind. Remember where you have been. Notice where you are. Imagine where you might go. And occasionally, fold it away and look at the actual road. Elena looked toward the rain basin. That sounds like advice for more than maps. Most good map advices. The hour passed slowly, though Elena could not have said how time moved in such a place. The tea remained warm. The rain remained steady. The lamps did not burn lower. No one came to ask for anything. No bell rang. No door opened. At first, Elena thought this stillness would make her restless. Instead, it made her honest. She realized that she had been carrying a fear beneath, the wonder of the last few days. A fear that the rain-bound bookshop had appeared because something was wrong with her, because she had failed in some quiet way, because everyone else could move through life with ordinary doors. while she needed magical intervention from a rain-soaked wall. Sitting there in the marginal tea room, she began to understand differently. The shop did not appear to shame the lost. It appeared to honor the part of them still willing to be found. That was not failure. That was grace of a kind. When they rose to leave, Elena felt rested in a way sleep alone had not given her. Mrs. Wren collected the cups. The cat stretched, stepped delicately down from the bench, and led them back to the arched door. Before Elena crossed through, she looked back once more. Rain fell into the courtyard. The stone basin overflowed quietly into channels she could not see. The trees' book-shaped lanterns glowed like small unwritten thoughts. "Can I come here again?" she asked. Mrs. Wren adjusted her shawl. "For map shows the way. And if it does not, then perhaps you will find another place to sit." Elena nodded. That no longer sounded like a loss. They stepped back into the rain-bound bookshop. The shelves seemed closer now, warm and familiar. The cat vanished immediately into a section labeled, "For those who pretend they do not like company." Mrs. Wren returned to the counter, and Elena wandered slowly through the aisles, carrying her rolled map. She passed books that hummed faintly, books with covers soft as fabric, books sealed with ribbon, books that smelled of pine forests, sea wind, old kitchens, and summer dust. One shelf held only tiny volumes, each no bigger than her palm. Their sign read, "For Realizations." Too small to notice. At first Elena smiled. Then a book near her elbow slid out. Its cover was pale yellow, with a pressed leaf beneath the cloth. The title appeared slowly. "The People Who Wait Quietly Beside Us." Elena touched the spine. The book did not move further. Not for her, then. She looked around the shop. Near the front window, a woman stood with her back to Elena. She wore a dark coat, her hood still damp with rain. One hand rested uncertainly on a shelf. Elena had not heard the bell. The woman turned slightly. It was the young mother from the library, the one who had been using the quiet reading room. She looked younger in the warm light of the shop, and more tired. Her baby was not with her. Without the child in her arms, she seemed unsure what to do with him. Elena started to step forward, then paused. This was not her library, and perhaps not every reader needed the librarian they knew to witness their finding. Mrs. Wren looked up from the counter and caught Elena's eye. Gently, almost imperceptibly, she shook her head. So Elena stayed where she was. The pale yellow book slid from the shelf and landed softly in the young woman's hands. The woman looked down at it. Her shoulders trembled once. She sat in the nearest chair. Elena moved quietly away. Some doors were not hers. Some kindnesses were best offered by leaving space. She returned to the round table near the back, where the book of rainy doors waited open. On the page was a new line, "A door opened for you." Hal learned the grace of not standing in every doorway. Elena laughed under her breath. The book was becoming very direct. She read the line again, more slowly. Then she sat with it. In the library, she had always known when to help, or thought she had. A reader hovering too long near one shelf, a child frustrated with a difficult book, an elderly patron pretending not to need help carrying volumes to a table. Elena noticed, stepped in, guided, offered, solved. Most of the time, this was good. But perhaps sometimes she stepped too quickly. Perhaps sometimes people needed not rescue, but room. The rain-bound bookshop knew this. Its shelves offered books, but did not force them into hands. Its doors appeared, but did not chase. Its questions waited until opened. Even Mrs. Wren, with all her knowing, rarely answered more than was asked. Elena sat back. This, too, was a kind of librarianship, the art not only of giving the right book, but of trusting the reader's own hand to reach. The thought followed her when he left the shop that night. The rain had lightened. Mist curled along the street. The green door closed behind her, and the brass bell rang once, low and sweet. She did not turn back immediately. Instead, she looked across at the library. Her library. Its upper windows were dark. The reading room windows reflected the lamps of the street. Behind the reference shelves, The quiet room held its green chair, its cedar cupboard, its new sign. Elena crossed the lane. At the library door, she turned. The rain-bound bookshop still stood there. For once, it did not vanish at once. Warm light moved in its windows. Young mother sat near the front, reading the pale yellow book with one hand pressed against her heart. Mrs. Wren stood behind the counter, wrapping something in brown paper. The cat sat in the window, tail curled around its paws. Elena lifted a hand. Mrs. Wren lifted hers. Then Elena went inside. The next day, something subtle changed in the library. Not in the building, not in the arrangement of shelves or the pattern of readers. The rain continued. The newspapers arrived. The fire needed tending, and Mr. Bellamy still objected to the weather, as if someone might eventually take action. The change was in Elena. She moved more slowly, not inefficiently, not lazily, but with a new kind of attention. When someone paused in an aisle, she did not immediately ask what they needed. She waited, giving them time to hear themselves think. When the young mother came in, Lena smiled, but did not ask about the previous night or the pale yellow book. She only nodded toward the quiet room, and the woman nodded back with visible gratitude. When Daniel came in, Lena did not ask whether he had bought a train ticket. He wandered the travel shelves for a while, then borrowed a book about coastal footpaths and a small volume of poems about weather. He seemed pleased by both. At noon, Lena set out a small tray in a quiet reading room, tea, cups, and a plate of plain biscuits. She hesitated over a card, then wrote, "For anyone who needs a quiet moment." By afternoon, someone had added beneath it in pencil, "Thank you." No signature. Elena left the note there. When the library closed, she checked the quiet room and found the young mother's chair neatly pushed in. On the side table lay a folded piece of paper. Elena picked it up. Inside, in careful handwriting, were the words, "I thought needing quiet meant I was ungrateful. Today I sat here for 20 minutes and remembered that I am still a person, not only a pair of arms carrying someone else. Thank you for the room." Elena sat down in the green chair. She read the note again. Then she folded it carefully and placed it inside her father's notebook on a blank page after his last entry. A new kind of record, perhaps, not borrowing histories, not names and needs she had to carry. Only proof that a room had opened and someone had rested there. That evening, when Elena returned upstairs, she unrolled her map. It had changed again. The library was more detailed now. The quiet reading room had a tiny lamp drawn in its window. The marginal room appeared at the end of the gray path, its little cup of tea steaming. And near the lower edge of the page, beyond the familiar streets, a new shape had formed, a bridge, stone, arched, crossing a narrow river. Beside it, a label appeared in silver pencil, "For returning what was never yours to keep." Elena frowned gently. "That sounds ominous," she told the map. The map, wisely, said nothing. The catalogue of unasked questions lay nearby. She opened it. A new question waited. "What have you mistaken for responsibility because it was easier than calling it love?" Elena closed the book, then opened it again, because closing it had not helped. The question remained. She carried it with her through supper, through washing the dishes, through banking the small fire, through listening to rain tick against the windows. What have you mistaken for responsibility because it was easier than calling it love? She thought first of the library, then of her father's office, then of her readers, then, unexpectedly, of a letter. Not an old letter from her father, not a rain-bound note, a real letter, tucked in a drawer upstairs, written nearly 2 years earlier by her younger sister, Aunt. Elena had not thought of it in months. That was not true. She had thought of it often, but never for long. Anna lived far away now, in a town by the southern coast. She had left years ago, not angrily, but restlessly. The library had never held her the way it held Elena. Anna loved bright rooms, open markets, music in streets, sea wind, and people who spoke before thinking. She had found the town of her childhood too narrow, too rainy, too full of books that whispered, when she wanted songs. The sisters wrote at first, then less, then only at birthdays and holidays. 2 years ago, Anna had written asking Elena to visit. Not for any emergency, not for illness, not because something had gone wrong, only because, as she wrote, I would like you to know the version of me who lives here. Elena had intended to reply properly. She had been busy with the library roof repairs, then the winter reading program, then budget trouble, then 100 small things that were not excuses, but had become them. She sent a polite note saying she hoped to come when the library was less demanding. Anna replied warmly, but briefly. Since then, the distance between them had remained civil and carefully dusted. Elena had told herself the library needed her. That was true. Perhaps it had also been easier than admitting she did not know how to visit a sister who had chosen a life she did not understand, and who might see too clearly the life Elena had chosen in return. Responsibility, she thought, could be a very respectable hiding place. At midnight, the brass bell rang. Elena did not immediately rise. She sat by the window, looking at the rain. Then she took the old letter from the drawer. The paper had softened along the folds. She read it again. Dear Elena, I know you will say the library cannot spare you, and perhaps that is true, but I am going to ask anyway. Come for a few days when you can. Not because anything is wrong, because things are good, and I realize you do not know what my good life looks like. There is a bakery here that makes orange buns you would pretend are too sweet, and then eat two of. There is a second-hand bookstall by the harbor. There are gulls that shout like rude old men. There is a room waiting if you ever want it. I miss you in a way that does not know how to be dramatic. Come if you can. Elena sat very still. Rain blurred the window. Across the street, the bookshop glowed. The bridge on the map waited. For returning what was never yours to keep. Perhaps, Elena thought, she had been keeping a version of herself that Anna had outgrown, or a version of Anna that belonged to childhood, or a quiet resentment that Anna had left. And Elena had stayed, though neither of them had said those words aloud. Perhaps she had been holding the distance between them as if it were a duty. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in her coat pocket. Then she crossed the street. The rain-bound bookshop opened before her. The bell rang. Mrs. Wren stood at the counter, as if she had expected not only Elena, but the letter too. Ah, she said softly. The bridge. Elena touched the pocket where Anna's letter rested. I think so. The shop was quieter than usual tonight. No other readers were visible. The shelves stood in warm shadow. Rain tapped steadily against the glass. A single lamp burned on the round table, where a book lay waiting. Its cover was blue, not the deep blue of night or the gray blue of rain, but the bright, softened blue of a distant sea under cloud. Elena approached. The title was written in white ink. A sister who lived by the harbor. Her breath caught. Mrs. Wren came to stand beside her. You do not have to read it tonight. Elena rested her fingers on the cover. What if I already know what it says? Then perhaps it is not here to tell you something new. Perhaps it is here to help you tell the truth gently. Elena looked at Mrs. Wren. I have not written to her properly. No. I told myself I was busy. You were, but not only busy. No. The kindness in Mrs. Wren's honesty made Elena's eyes sting. The bookshop did not scold. That might have been easier. Scolding could be resisted. Kindness entered quietly to defend against. Elena opened the blue book. The pages were not filled with a story. They held letters. Some were written in Anna's hand, though Elena knew they had never been sent. Some were in Elena's own, she had never written them. Some were only fragments, beginnings, endings, crossed-out lines, attempts. Dear Anna, I do not know how to visit without feeling left behind. Dear Elena, I did not leave because I loved you less. Dear Anna, the library became easier to understand than missing you. Dear Elena, I wanted you to see that I had become happy, not because I wanted you to feel small, but because I wanted you near it. Elena closed the book with a shaking hand. Mrs. Wren said nothing. For a few moments, the only sound was the rain. Then Elena took Anna's real letter from her pocket. I should answer, yes, I do not know what to say. Mrs. Wren reached beneath the counter and produced paper, an envelope, and a fountain pen filled with glue-black ink. Begin there. Elena sat at the round table. The blue book remained beside her, closed but present. The rain-bound bookshop seemed to draw itself into a soft circle of lamplight around her. Even the shelves appeared to lean away slightly, giving her privacy. She uncapped the pen. For a while she wrote nothing. Then, slowly, she began. Dear Anna, I have kept your letter for nearly 2 years. I told myself I had not answered because the library was busy, and it was. But that was not the whole truth. The whole truth is softer and more awkward. I think I did not know how to come see your life without feeling the shape of the place where you had left mine. That was not fair to you. I would like to know the version of you who lives by the harbor. If the room is still waiting, I would like to come when the rain here has ended, or perhaps before it does. I would like to try the orange buns. I will probably say they are too sweet. You may remind me that I was warned. I miss you too, in the same undramatic way. Love, Elena. She read it over. It was not perfect. It did not explain everything. It did not repair years in a single page. It did not try to. It opened a door. That was enough for tonight. Mrs. Wren brought sealing wax, and a small brass stamp shaped like a raindrop. Do all letters require ceremony here? Elena asked, voice thick but steadier. Only the honest ones. Elena folded the letter, sealed the envelope, and wrote Anna S. name on the front, the moment she set down the pen. The sister who lived by the harbor opened by itself. The pages were blank now, except for one line. Returned with tenderness. Needed by the post before noon. Elena laughed softly and wiped at her eyes. I suppose even magical books respect postal schedules. Most do, Mrs. Wren said. The unreliable ones become poetry. Elena placed the letter carefully in her bag. The blue book faded from the table until only a faint scent of orange peel and sea wind remained. She sat back, tired and lighter. Mrs. Wren poured tea. They did not speak for a while. There was nothing else the night required. When Elena left the bookshop, the rain had become very soft, almost a mist again. The wall behind her turned blank as the clock struck 2. She crossed to the library, holding the letter in her bag as if it were both fragile and strong. Inside, the quiet reading room waited. She unrolled the map on the desk. The stone bridge at the lower edge had changed. A tiny envelope now rested on its middle arch. On the far side of the bridge, a road led toward a small drawing of the sea. Elena touched the road lightly. Then she smiled. Not every door opened inward. Some opened across distance. Some opened through ink. Some began with the words, Dear Anna. She left the map open on the desk and went upstairs to sleep. The rain continued through the night, steady and kind. And somewhere across town, beneath windows streaked with silver, other people turned in their sleep, dreamed of rooms they had not yet entered, books they had not yet opened, and bridges that waited patiently for morning. Part 5. The bridge toward the sea. Morning arrived quietly, as if it did not wish to disturb what the night had mended. The rain had not stopped, but it had changed again. It was lighter now, fine as breath on glass, drifting rather than falling. The town beneath it seemed washed clean of sharpness. Roofs softened into gray, chimneys blurred. The church clock stood with its face half-veiled, and the old street lamps, though no longer needed, still held a little amber light from the night before. Lena woke in her own bed this time. For several moments she remained still beneath the quilt, letting herself become aware of the room by degrees. The pale square of the window, the small wooden chair beside the wardrobe, the 3 house plants leaning, with their usual quiet optimism, toward the gray light, the faint smell of ink still on her fingers. Then she remembered the letter. She sat up. An envelope lay on the little table beside her bed, weighted beneath the blue peppermint tin she had brought up from the quiet reading room. For one uneasy moment, Lelena wondered whether the letter might have changed overnight, whether the words might have rearranged themselves, or vanished, or become somehow more honest than she had intended. But when she lifted the tin, envelope remained exactly as she had left it, cream paper, blue-black ink, Anna's name written across the front in her own careful hand. No magic at all, except the plain and difficult kind of having written what she meant. Elena held the letter in both hands. It felt heavier than paper should, not burdensome, just real. She dressed with unusual care, choosing her dark green dress and a wool cardigan with deep pockets. She brushed her hair, pinned it loosely, and made tea. She ate toast with honey, though her stomach fluttered softly, as if some part of her were already walking toward the post-box. At 7:30 she went downstairs. The library was still dim and cool. The reading room smelled of old embers and rain at the windows. Elena lit the lamps one by one, and the familiar pools of gold appeared across the tables. She unlocked the front doors, collected the returns from the box, and arranged the newspapers in their rack. The letter stayed in her pocket. At 8 o'clock, Mr. Bellamy arrived. He shook his umbrella, glanced at her face, and said, "You look as though you are about to do something sensible and unpleasant." Elena looked up. "That is a very specific observation. I was a schoolmaster for 41 years. I know the look of a person approaching necessary correspondence." Elena smiled despite herself. "It is only a letter." "A letter is only a letter if one has delayed posting it." She stared at him. Mr. Bellamy unfolded his newspaper with great dignity. "I am old, Miss Vale, not unobservant." Elena placed the morning paper on the desk beside him. "Would you like tea?" I would like the rain to stop making my knees philosophical, but tea will do." She made him a cup. At 9, the library settled into its day. The young mother came in with the baby tucked against her shoulder, the child asleep under a knitted yellow blanket. She did not go immediately to the quiet reading room. Instead, she approached the circulation desk. "I wanted to thank you again," she said. Elena rested her hand lightly on the returns pile. "You are very welcome." The woman looked toward the back of the library. "That room feels like it was waiting. In a way, I think it was." The baby stirred softly. The woman lowered her voice. "I found a book last night." Elena did not move too quickly. "Did you?" "Yes." Her eyes filled, but she smiled. "Not here. Somewhere else. Somewhere I am not sure I can explain. You do not have to." The woman looked relieved. It was about a woman who thought she had become only what others needed from her. She was wrong, of course, but it took her a while to believe it. Elena smiled gently. "Most important things do. I think I may come sit in the quiet room again, if that is all right." "It is more than all right." The woman nodded and made her way toward the back. Elena watched her go, resisting the old urge to follow, to offer, to ask, to ensure. Instead, she let the woman enter alone. A door opened. A reader crossed it. That was enough. By mid-morning, the letter in Elena's pocket seemed to grow warmer. Not magically, not truly, but she was aware of it with every step. At 10:30, she took her coat from the hook. Mr. Bellamy lowered his newspaper. "Posting it?" "Yes." "Good." Lena paused by the desk. "Do you need anything while I am out?" "A younger left knee, if you pass one." "I will ask at the post office." Much obliged. The post office stood at the corner of Bell Lane and Market Street, beneath a clock that was always 6 minutes slow. It was not far. On a dry day, the walk took less than 5 minutes. In the rain, under an umbrella, with an honest letter in one's pocket, it felt longer. Elena stepped outside. The town was awake now, though gently. The bakery windows glowed with heat. The apothecary was arranging bottles behind the glass. A cart of apples stood under a striped awning in the square, the fruit shining red and gold beneath the rain. Someone had tied a blue ribbon around the handle of the town pump. Water moved along the gutters, in narrow silver streams. Elena crossed the street. For a moment, she looked at the blank wall between the apothecary and the blue house. There was no bookshop, only wet stone. But Elena no longer felt the need to test the wall with her hand. Some things were more trustworthy when not forced. She continued down Bell Lane. "The post office. Mrs. Alder stood behind the counter sorting parcels with the stern efficiency of a woman who believed civilization depended on legible addresses. "Morning, Elena." "Good morning, Mrs." Alder held out her hand. Elena placed the letter on the counter. For a moment she did not let go. Mrs. Alder looked at her over her spectacles, but said nothing. Elena released it. The letter lay there, pale and ordinary, beneath the post-office lamp. "South Coast," Mrs. Alder said, reading the address. "Should go out with noon collection. Thank you. Anything else?" Elena nearly said no. Then she saw, on the little side table, a display of blank postcards. Both showed views of the town, the church tower, the bridge, the market square, the library in spring. One card, however, showed the library on a rainy evening, its windows glowing warmly, the street shining before it. Elena picked it up. "I will take this too." Mrs. Alder wrapped the postcard in brown paper and took payment for both stamp and card. As Elena left, the rain slowed. A pale brightness opened behind the clouds. Not sunshine, but the suggestion that the sky remembered how. She stood outside the post office for a moment, hand resting on the wrapped postcard. The letter was gone from her pocket. Not gone forever, not lost. Sent. There was a difference. The absence felt tender, like the space left on a shelf when a book had been borrowed by someone who truly needed it. When Elena returned to the library, the first thing she did was go to the quiet reading room. The map lay open on the desk. The bridge drawn at its lower edge had changed again. The tiny envelope was no longer resting on the middle arch. Instead, it had become a little bird, no larger than a thumbnail, flying along the road toward the small drawing of the sea. A dotted line followed behind it, stitched in silver pencil. Beneath the bridge, words appeared. "Return to the road." Elena smiled. She touched the tiny bird with one finger. Then she placed the postcard beside the map. The library on a rainy evening looked back at her from the printed card, warm and familiar. She thought she might send it to Anna once her sister replied. Or perhaps before. Perhaps one honest letter did not need to wait for another. She set it aside. The day continued. At noon the postcart rolled past the library windows. Elena watched it go, trying not to imagine the letter inside. It would leave town by road, then rail, then perhaps another road toward the southern coast. It would pass fields, bridges, stations, villages she did not know. Eventually, it would arrive in a seaside town where gulls shouted like rude old men, and a bakery sold orange buns too sweet to resist. For the first time in years, Anna's life felt not distant, but reachable, not yet entered, but reachable. That afternoon, Elena found herself making small changes around the library, not large ones, nothing the town council could object to, nothing that required a budget committee or written approval. She moved one of the reading lamps to the poetry corner, where the shadows had always been too deep. She placed a basket of bookmarks near the door, along with a note inviting people to take one. She brought the chipped blue teapot down from her flat and set it in the quiet reading room. She shifted the children's low table closer to the window so they could watch the rain. Then, after hesitating only a little, she placed a new notebook on the desk in the quiet reading room. On the first page, she wrote, "If a book, room, sentence, or quiet moment helped you today, you may leave a note here. No names needed." She set a pencil beside it. By closing time, 3 notes had appeared. Chair by the window was exactly where I needed to sit. I read one page and breathed better. I thought silence would make me feel alone. It did not. Elena read them slowly. Then she closed the notebook and left it on the desk. Some records did not need cataloging. Some were better left open. That night, the rain returned in full. It came steadily after supper, darkening the windows and filling the lane with soft sound. Elena sat upstairs with the house at the end of the rain open in her lap. Her father's chosen book had become a companion over the last day, not demanding too much at once. Its story moved slowly, following the woman in the rain as she searched for a house that appeared only when she stopped naming what she had lost. Elena read 3 chapters. Then she reached a page where her father had tucked a narrow slip of paper. On it he had written, "The best books do not hurry the reader toward healing. They keep the lamplit while healing finds its own chair." Lalina held the note for a long time. At midnight the brass bell rang. Lalina did not rush. She finished her tea, marked her place, folded her father's note back into the page. Then she put on her coat, took the map and the catalogue of unasked questions, and went down into the rain. Rain-bound Bookshop waited. Tonight its windows glowed softer than usual, more ember than gold. The sign above the door swayed gently. Rain streamed from the little awning in silver beads. Elena entered. The bell rang. Inside, the shop smelled of cedar, teak, damp wool, and something bright and faintly sweet, orange peel. Elena paused. Mrs. Wren stood behind the counter, wrapping a book in blue paper. "Good evening, dear. Good evening." The cat was nowhere visible, which meant Elena had learned that it was either asleep in a place of importance or busy judging someone privately. On the counter sat a small plate of buns glazed with orange syrup. Elena stared at them. Mrs. Wren looked up innocently. "Tea? Did the shop bake those?" "The shop rarely bakes. It suggests." "Tpoom. There is a very obliging oven 3 streets away. The bakery is closed." "Yes." Elena considered asking more, then decided she liked the buns too much in theory to risk learning the details. She sat at the round table. Mrs. Wren brought tea and placed 1 orange bun on a small plate before her. Elena took a bite. It was too sweet. It was wonderful. She laughed softly. Mrs. Wren smiled. "Practicing? For my sister. A worthwhile discipline." Elena ate another bite. The sweetness was bright and sticky and full of warmth. It tasted nothing like the rain-bound town, nothing like the library, nothing like gray skies and old shelves. It tasted like a place where windows opened toward the sea. For a moment, Lena could almost hear gulls. She looked at Mrs. Wren. "Will she answer? You sister?" "Yes. I do not know." This was not the answer Lena wanted. It was, however, the answer she trusted. Mrs. Wren poured tea. "Letters are doors," she said, "but one cannot walk through from both sides alone." Elena nodded. "I know. And yet you opened your side." "Yes." "Then tonight let that be enough." Elena looked down at the bun, at the small curve where she had bitten into it. Enough. The word seemed to settle over the table. Not everything had to become complete immediately. Some things could be sent. Some could travel. Some could wait in weather and distance and on the certain hands. The shop around them was quiet, though not empty. Man Elena did not know sat near a shelf labeled for apologies not yet spoken, turning a hat in his hands while a book rested unopened beside him. Near the front, Clara Finch, still in her yellow raincoat, was reading a small purple book with an expression of intense seriousness. Elena nearly stood, then she stopped. Clara looked safe, curious, held by the lamplight. Mrs. Wren had seen her. Shop had seen her. Elena sat back down. "Good," Mrs. Wren murmured. Elena gave her a sideways look. "I'm learning." "Yes. It is annoying. Most learning is, briefly." The brass bell rang again. Someone else entered, shaking rain from their sleeves. The shop adjusted around them, shelves shifting almost imperceptibly, making room. Elena unrolled her map on the table. Mrs. Wren leaned closer. The bridge toward the sea was still there, with the little bird traveling along its dotted silver line. But new details had appeared round the town. The quiet reading room now had 2 chairs drawn inside it. The marginal tea room sat in its courtyard beyond the gray path. The rain-bound bookshop was marked by a green door, 3 raindrops, and a tiny brass bell. Near the upper edge of the page, a cluster of shelves appeared, arranged in a spiral. Beside them was a label, "For the book that has been waiting longest." Lena touched the words. "What does that mean?" Mrs. Wren looked at the map, then at Elena. "I wondered when that would appear. It sounds concerning." "Not concerning. Important. In my experience, important is often concerning, with better posture." Mrs. Wren chuckled. Helena studied the spiral shelves. They were not in the library, not in the bookshop either, unless the map was no longer obeying physical geography at all, which seemed increasingly likely. "For the book that has been waiting longest," she read again. "Every rain-bound reader has one," Mrs. Wren said. "One what?" "Book that waits longest. In the shop? Sometimes. Sometimes in memory. Sometimes in a drawer. Sometimes in a person's own unwritten heart." Helena looked at her. The old woman's voice had softened. "These are not always books one wants to read. They are not always painful either. But they are patient. They wait while we read around them." Lena thought of her father's green book, the office, Anna's letter, the map-making box. "How do I find it?" Mrs. Wren nodded toward the map. "You already began." The spiral shelves shimmered faintly in the lamplight. A soft sound came from somewhere deep in the shop, a book closing. Helena looked toward the aisles. The shelves nearest the back seemed to have shifted while she was not watching. Where before there had been a section labeled for questions best asked, while seated, there was now a narrow passageway between two tall bookcases. It curved left, then right, and disappeared into amber shadow. At its entrance hung a small sign. The patient stacks. Helena stood. Mrs. Wren did not rise. "Should I go alone?" "Yes." Helena took a breath. The orange bun sat half-eaten on the plate. The tea steamed gently. The map lay open on the table, its new spiral waiting. Helena stepped into the patient stacks. The passageway was narrow, but not cramped. Shelves rose high on both sides, filled with books whose spines were mostly blank. Some were wrapped. Some were bare. Some were bare. Some were bare. Some were bare. Small lamps glowed at intervals, each one shaded in green glass, casting soft circles of light over the floor. The sound of the main shop faded behind her. Here, the air was quieter, not silent. She could hear the rain, though there were no windows. She could hear her own breathing. She could hear, very faintly, the dry whisper of pages settling. Helena walked slowly. The shelves curved in a gentle spiral, just as on the map. Every few steps she passed a small brass plate fixed to the wood. Books waiting since childhood, books waiting through grief, books waiting beneath good excuses, books waiting for the reader to stop apologizing. Helena paused before that last one. Several books shifted slightly. She kept walking. The spiral carried her inward. As she moved deeper, she began to notice familiar things tucked between the books. A pressed autumn leaf, a train ticket with no destination, a scrap of blue ribbon, a child's drawing of a castle, library card from the year she turned 12, a recipe written in Anna's uneven teenage handwriting. These were not books. Not exactly. They were markers, little pieces of lives, perhaps left by readers who had come before, or by versions of Helena she had misplaced. The air smelled faintly of cedar and old rain. At the center of the spiral stood a single reading stand. On it lay a book. It was not large. Helena had expected something heavy, perhaps ancient, bound in leather or locked with brass clasps. Instead, it was a plain cloth-bound volume, the color of warm gray. Its corners were softened. Its pages were slightly uneven. There was no title on the cover. Beside it sat a small lamp. Helena approached. The book did not open. No title appeared. No silver writing shimmered. It simply waited. She rested her fingers on the cover. A phoning passed through her so softly she almost missed it. Not memory. Not grief. Not longing. Something simpler. A small, clear desire. To write. Lena removed her hand. The word had arrived too plainly to ignore. She looked around the patient stacks, as if someone might step forward and explain that she had misunderstood. But there was only the spiral of shelves, the soft lamps, the rain that should not have been audible, and the waiting book. She touched the cover again. This time the title appeared. Not in gold, not in silver, in ordinary dark ink, as if written by hand. The story Helena never began. She closed her eyes. There it was, not dramatic, not tragic, not even entirely surprising. Before she became a librarian, Helena had wanted to write stories. Not for fame, Not really. The table, perhaps. When young, she had imagined a shelf with her name on it, and felt a private thrill. But more than that, she had wanted to make places. Quiet places. Rainy villages. Impossible houses. Roads that led to valleys. Not on any map. She had wanted to write the kind of books that found someone at the right time. Then life became practical. Her father grew older. The library needed her. The town needed her. Readers needed her. And writing became something she would return to someday. When there was time, when she had something worth saying, when she was less tired, when the library was stable, when the roof was repaired, when the next season was over. Years passed. No season announced itself as the right one. The unwritten stories did not vanish. They waited beneath her competence, beneath her helpfulness, beneath her knowledge of what everyone else might like to read. Elena opened the gray book. The pages were blank. Of course they were. But unlike Mrs. Wren's blank book of listening, this one did not feel like an instruction, felt like an invitation with no witness except herself. On the first page, a single line appeared. Begin badly if you must. Begin quietly if you can. But begin. Lila laughed once, under her breath, and the sound trembled. She turned the page. Blank. Another. Blank. At the center of the book, tucked gently between pages, that's pencil. Not a magical pencil. Not silver. Not glowing. A plain pencil. Sharpened well. Elena held it. The patient stacks seemed to draw a long, patient breath. She thought of the map upstairs, the one she had begun with a road or river or path made by rainwater between stones. She thought of the girl in the green chair copying imaginary maps into notebooks. She thought of the stories she had loved before she cared whether loving them was useful. The book waited. Elena placed the pencil against the page. For a moment, nothing came. Then one sentence did. She wrote, "The house stood at the end of the rain, though no road in town admitted leading there." She looked at the sentence. It was not perfect. It was not polished. It was alive. A second sentence followed. Every night, its windows glowed for someone who had forgotten the way home, and every morning the hill where it stood became only mist. Elena stopped. The page seemed warmer beneath her hand. Somewhere beyond the spiral, rain tapped softly against unseen glass. She wrote a third sentence, then a fourth. Not much. Half a page, perhaps. A beginning and no more. But it was the first beginning she had written for herself in years. When she finally set down the pencil, her hand was shaking. Not from fear. From the unfamiliar use of a muscle long rested. The gray book did not praise her. It did not glow or sing or rearrange itself into something brilliant. It simply accepted the words. That was kinder. Elena closed it. The title remained on the cover. The stories Elena never began. She carried it carefully back through the spiral. As she walked outward, the brass plates seemed gentler now. Books waiting since childhood. Books waiting through grief. Books waiting beneath good excuses. Books waiting for the reader to stop apologizing. At the entrance to the patient stacks, Mrs. Wren stood waiting with Elena's tea. Now refreshed, Elena held up the gray book. "This one is mine." "Yes, I thought it would be something else. Most people do. I wrote half a page." Mrs. Wren's smile was quiet and deep. "A considerable journey. It felt small. Beginnings often do. That is why they can be carried." Elena sat down at the round table, the gray book in her lap. The shop felt softer around her now. The other readers moved quietly through the aisles. Clara Finch had gone, or perhaps had moved somewhere Elena could not see. The man with the hat was writing something on a small card. The rain continued beyond the windows, steady as breath. Elena ate the rest of the orange bun. Too sweet. Still wonderful. Mrs. Wren looked at the gray book. "You may take that one home." "I thought so. He must write in it." "I thought that too." "Not because it must become good." Lena glanced up. Mrs. Wren's gaze was kind, but firm. "Because it must become yours." The words landed gently. Lena nodded. The catalogue of unasked questions lay open on the table. Though Elena had not opened it, a new question had appeared. What if the story you were waiting to deserve was waiting to belong to you first? Elena copied the question into her mind, not to answer immediately, only to keep. When she left the shop that night, she carried the gray book beneath her coat. The wall turned blank behind her. The rain followed her across the street and into the library, soft on her shoulders, cool on her cheeks. She did not go upstairs. Instead, she entered the quiet reading room, lit the lamp, unrolled the map, and placed the gray book beside it. The spiral of shelves on the map had changed. At its center, where the waiting book had been, there was now a tiny pencil mark. A beginning. Elena smiled. She opened the stories Elena never began and read the few sentences she had written. They were still imperfect. They still pleased her. She wrote one more line before bed. Inside the house was a room where every chair faced a window, and every window looked out onto the weather. Someone needed before they could rest. Then she closed the book. The rain fell. The library slept, and somewhere inside Elena, not loudly, not urgently, not with demand or ambition, a door that had waited longest stood open just a little wider. Part 6. Closed. When found. The rain ended on a Sunday morning. It did not stop all at once. There was no sudden clearing of the sky, no grand beam of sunlight breaking through the clouds, no dramatic brightening of the town. The rain simply grew thinner and thinner, until it was no longer rain, only a softness in the air, a silver memory clinging to roof tiles, window panes, and the dark seams between cobblestones. Elena woke to quiet. For a few seconds, she did not understand what had changed. Then she realized she could hear the town differently. A cartwheel over stone, a distant door closing, a kettle whistling somewhere below and across the lane, birds in the gutter outside her window, shaking water from their feathers. The absence of rain had made room for smaller sounds. Elena lay still beneath the quilt, listening. On the table beside her bed lay the gray book, the stories Elena never began. She had written in it every night since finding it in the patient stacks. Not much. A page here, half a page there. A sentence before sleep, a description of a house at the end of rain, a room filled with chairs and weathered windows, a woman who arrived carrying too many keys and slowly learned. She did not have to unlock every door she saw. It was not finished. It did not need to be. That had become one of the quiet surprises of the week. Elena had spent years believing that beginning a story meant accepting the heavy burden of finishing it beautifully. The gray book had asked for no such promise. It asked only for presence, for a few honest lines, for the door to remain open. She sat up, reached for the pencil tucked inside the cover, and wrote one sentence before leaving bed. By morning, the house had not vanished, but the woman no longer needed to stand outside counting its windows. She read it once, then she smiled. Downstairs the library waited in its Sunday stillness. It did not open to readers until the afternoon, which gave Elena the morning to move slowly. She made tea, watered the 3 houseplants, folded her quilt, and took the stories Elena never began with her into the quiet reading room. The room had changed over the last several days, though only in small ways. The green chair had been brushed clean and moved a little closer to the window. The desk held a lamp, a jar of pencils, the notebook of quiet room notes, Father's old blue peppermint tin, and a small vase of rosemary. On the wall, above the cedar cupboard, Elena had hung the map, a map of doors that opened kindly. It had grown richer each night. The library was drawn in warm detail, its windows lit softly. The rain-bound bookshop sat across the lane, rain-doored and rain-bright. The marginal tea-room rested in the margin beyond the garden path. The stone bridge toward the sea carried a tiny silver bird. The patient stacks spiraled gently near the edge, with a pencil mark glowing at the center. And now, overnight, one final path had appeared. It began at the rain-bound bookshop. It curved through the street, past the library, through the quiet reading room, around the green chair, and then, strangely, inward, not into any drawn building, not toward the sea, not toward the tea room, but toward a small blank space in the middle of the map. There, in the blank space, 3 words had appeared. You are here. Elena looked at them for a long time. They were so simple that at first they seemed almost disappointing. After hidden rooms, rain doors, magical shelves, patient books, bridges, tea rooms, and questions that entered like keys, the map had brought her back to the oldest truth any map could tell. You are here, not where she used to be, not where she feared she had failed to go, not only where others needed her. Here, in a library after rain, in a room that had once been grief and was now rest, in a life that was not finished, in a story that had begun. Lena touched the words lightly. The pencil lines shimmered once, then settled. At noon, she walked to the post office, even though it was closed, simply to pass the red post box outside. There was no letter from Anna yet. Of course there was not. Not enough time had passed. The world still required roads, trains, sorting rooms, hands, weather, and patience. But Elena stood before the postbox anyway, not waiting exactly, only acknowledging that something had been sent. On the way back, the town felt newly washed. Shop windows were being opened. The bakery had set trays of warm buns near the front. The apothecary door stood ajar, releasing a scent of lemon and herbs. The blue house with the leaning chimney looked less lonely in daylight. Between the apothecary and the blue house, the wall was blank, drying now, stone by stone. Elena paused before it. Without rain, the wall looked utterly ordinary. Ivy clung to one edge. A small crack ran near the bottom. Someone had once scratched a faint line into one stone, perhaps with a key, perhaps years ago. There was no sign, no green door, no brass bell. Elena felt a soft ache, not sharp, only tender. Not tonight, then, she whispered. The wall, sensibly, made no reply. Sunday afternoon brought readers. Not many, because the sky had cleared enough for people to remember errands and walks and gardens. But those who came stayed longer than usual. Perhaps the end of rain had left them sleepy. Perhaps the library had become warmer in some quiet way. Perhaps Elena was learning to see without reaching too quickly. The young mother came with her baby and left a note in the quiet room notebook. Today I rested before I was desperate. It felt strange. I will practice. Daniel Pike borrowed a railway timetable and a small guide to winter walks along the southern coast. He said nothing about buying a ticket, and Elena did not ask. Mr. Bellamy returned a book of poems. This was in my bag by mistake, he said. Of course, I read a few. By mistake? Entirely. Were they terrible? Folded his hands over the handle of his umbrella. One was tolerable. Lena smiled. That is high praise. I may accidentally borrow it again. I will keep it available. Mrs. Harlow came in near closing with a small bundle wrapped in cloth. For the quiet room, she said. Inside were 2 cushions embroidered with tiny green leaves. I had them in a cupboard, Mrs. Harlow said, waiting for somewhere to belong. Elena looked at the cushions, then at her. We seem to have a lot of that lately. Mrs. Harlow's eyes twinkled. Then perhaps we are finally opening cupboards. By evening, the library felt deeply peaceful. Elena closed the front doors, banked the fire, and walked through the rooms slowly. The children's corner, the poetry shelves, the reading tables, the reference room, the quiet room behind the shelves. Everywhere there was the gentle disorder of a place that had been used well. A book left open face down, which Elena corrected with affectionate disapproval. A pencil under a chair, a folded note in the quiet room notebook, a teacup left on the side table, empty but still faintly warm. Elena carried the cup upstairs, washed it, made her own tea, and sat by the window. The street outside was dry in patches now. Moonlight showed between clouds. The lampposts glowed steadily. The blank wall across the lane held no sign of the bookshop. The church clock struck 11, then 1/2 past, then midnight. Elena listened. No brass bell, only the town, a dog barking once, far away, a cart passing late, the faint settling of old roof beams. She told herself this was good. Perhaps the shop had closed because the rain had ended. Perhaps the door would open again with the next storm. Perhaps she simply did not need it tonight. Still, she sat a while longer. At 12:15, she reached for the stories Elena never began and wrote by lamplight. The house at the end of the lane did not disappear when the weather cleared. It became harder to see, that was all. In sunlight, it looked like an ordinary house, a little old, a little quiet, with a chair in the window and a kettle on the stove. But those who had once entered it knew better. They knew that some doors remain open, even when they no longer glow. She stopped. The sentence had brought tears to her eyes, though she was not sad. At 1 o'clock, she closed the book and went to bed. For the first time since the bookshop appeared, Elena dreamed not of doors, but of shelves. Long shelves, warm with lamplight, stretching through rooms she knew and rooms she did not. Some held books she had read. Some held books she might one day read. Some held books she would never open, and this felt peaceful rather than sad. At the end of the shelves sat Mrs. Wren, drinking tea. The smoke-colored cat slept on the hem of her skirt. "You are nearly found," Mrs. Wren said. "In every way?" "No, dear." Mrs. Wren smiled. "Enough for now." When Elena woke, it was a letter on the floor beneath her door. For one wild, impossible second, she thought it must be from Anna. But when she picked it up, she saw no stamp, no postmark, no address, only her name written in dark green ink, Elena Vale. He opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet. "Dear Elena, the rain may return tonight. If it does, come after midnight. Bring the gray book, and nothing you are not ready to leave behind. Warmly, Mrs. Wren." Elena stood in her small hallway, holding the letter. "Nothing you are not ready to leave behind." The words did not frighten her, but they made the day feel luminous at the edges. All Monday she moved through the library with a heightened gentleness. She did not rush the hours, though part of her listened for weather. By mid-morning, clouds gathered again. By noon, the sky had darkened. By 3, the first drops touched the windows. Lena looked up from stamping returns. Mr. Bellamy looked up from his newspaper. "Rain," he said. "Yes." He studied her face. "You look pleased." "I like rain." "So you have said," suspiciously often. By closing time the rain was steady. The town received it without surprise. Umbrellas opened. Windows glowed. The bakery shut its doors against the damp, and the apothecary sign creaked gently in the wind. Elena went upstairs early. She ate soup, wrote a little, packed nothing, because she did not know where she was going, and had the sense that packing would misunderstand the invitation. At 11:30, she returned to the quiet reading-room. The map waited on the wall. The path in the center still ended at the words, "You are here." But now, beneath them, another line was appearing, slowly, letter by letter. "And here is now to begin from." Elena stood beneath the map, holding the gray book. The rain thickened. At midnight, the brass bell rang. It sounded closer than usual, not across the street, not entirely. Almost as if the bell had rung inside the library itself. Elena put on her coat and crossed the lane. The rain-bound bookshop stood where it had before, warm between the apothecary and the blue house, but tonight it seemed both clearer and softer, as if seen through memory and rain at the same time. The green door shone. The windows glowed. The sign moved gently above the threshold. Open when needed, close when found. Elena stood under the awning and read the words one more time. Then she entered. The brass bell rang above her. The shop was empty. Not empty of books, of course. The shelves were full, the lamps lit, the counter polished, the rugs warm underfoot. But there were no readers in the chairs. No quiet figures in the aisles. No boy beneath the table. No young mother near the window. No Daniel with damp sleeves. No strangers from places where it was raining. Only Mrs. Wren stood behind the counter. And beside her, the smoke-colored cat sat with solemn dignity, as though aware this was not an ordinary visit. "Good evening, dear," Mrs. Wren said. Elena held the gray book against her chest. "Good evening." Mrs. Wren looked at the book. "You brought it. You asked me to." I did. The old woman came around the counter. Tonight she wore a dark blue dress and the storm-gray shawl. Her silver hair was pinned neatly. In her hand she carried a ring of keys. Though Elena had never seen any locked door in the shop, for a moment neither of them spoke. The rain tapped softly against the windows. Elena looked around. The shelves nearest her bore labels she had seen before, and labels she had not. For first aim for returning gently, for the book that was not finished, because it became a life, for when a door has done its kindness. Lena swallowed. It is closing to me, is not it, Mrs. Wren's face was tender. Yes, dear. The word was quiet. It landed softly and still made Elena ache. She nodded, because she had expected it, because the sign had said so from the beginning, because Mrs. Wren had told her that some doors would become prisons if they never closed. Still, I only just found it, Lena said. Still, I only just found what it opened. Elena looked down at the gray book. The stories Elena never began. She thought of her father's office becoming the quiet room, of Daniel and his sea station book, of the young mother sitting alone without apology, of the letter to Anna, of the map, of the first sentences of her own story, of orange buns and the marginal tea-room, and question that had asked what she loved before she became useful. The rain-bound bookshop had not been the destination. It had been the threshold. Mrs. Wren held out a hand. Come, there is one last shelf. Elena followed her through the shop. The aisles did not twist tonight. They made a clear path down the center, between warm rows of books. Lamps brightened as they passed and dimmed gently behind them. The cat walked ahead, tail high. At the back of the shop stood a shelf Lena had never seen. It was small, plain, made of pale wood. Above it hung no sign. On the shelf were only a few objects: blue peppermint tin, a sea-colored train ticket, a yellow baby blanket folded neatly, a postcard of the library in rain, a gray pencil, a pressed rosemary bookmark, and one empty space. Mrs. Wren stood beside it. Every reader leaves something, she said. Not payment, not debt, only a sign that they passed through and took what was needed. Elena looked at the objects. Are these real? As real as such things need to be. Elena understood then. Not literally, perhaps, but enough. She opened the gray book. The pages held her beginning. The house at the end of the rain. The woman with too many keys. The rooms that looked out onto the weather people needed before they could rest. Elena touched the page. What do I leave? Mrs. Wren did not answer. Elena thought of the instruction in the letter. Bring the gray book, and nothing you are not ready to leave behind. For one worried moment, she thought she might have to leave the book itself. But no, that was not right. The gray book was not something to leave behind. It was something to continue. She reached into her coat pocket and found the pencil. The plain pencil from the center of the patient stacks. The one she had used to begin. She held it for a moment, feeling the small weight of it. A beginning did not live in the pencil. It lived in the hand that returned to the page. Elena placed the pencil in the empty space on the shelf. The pale wood warmed beneath it. Above the shelf, words appeared where there had been no sign before. For the ones who begin quietly, Elena smiled through sudden tears. Mrs. Wren rested a hand on her shoulder. A fine leaving. Will someone else use it? When needed. Elena imagined another reader, perhaps years from now, perhaps in another rainy town, entering the patient stacks and finding a plain pencil waiting. She hoped they would be comforted by its ordinariness. She hoped they would begin badly if they must, quietly if they could, but begin. Mrs. Wren led her back to the round table. He was waiting. Of course it was. There were 2 cups, 1 plate of shortbread, and 1 small orange bun. Elena laughed softly. Still too sweet. Almost certainly, Mrs. Wren said. They sat, for the last time, though neither said it yet. They drank tea while rain stitched the windows, and the old bookshop breathed around them. Elena tried to memorize everything. The green-shaded lamp, the uneven shelves, Smell of cedar, the counter where the cat slept, the brass bell above the door, Mrs. Wren's hands round her cup, the warm impossible hush of books waiting to be kinned. But even as she tried, she understood that memory did not work by gripping. It worked more like reading. You entered, received, and let the page turn. "Will I remember it clearly?" she asked. Mrs. Wren looked at her over the rim of her cup. "Clearly enough. That sounds like one of your answers. It is one of my better ones." Elena smiled. The cat appeared beside her chair and, for the first time, climbed into her lap. She went very still. Mrs. Wren looked impressed. "That is rare. I am honored. You should be." The cat was warm and heavier than expected. It settled with a sigh, as if lending Elena the weight of the shop itself for a moment. She stroked its soft gray fur, and it began to purr. The sound was low, steady, and deeply calming, like distant thunder that had forgiven the sky. For a while no one spoke. Then Elena said, "What happens to you when the shop closes?" Mrs. Wren looked around. "It does not close to everyone, only to one reader at a time. So you will still be here, for those who need me? And when you are found?" Mrs. Wren's smile was small and mysterious, but no longer sad. "Then perhaps I will learn what door waits beyond tending." Elena nodded. He hoped there would be a good chair there, a good lamp, a book that did not ask too much too quickly. Mrs. Wren seemed to hear this without words. "I have had many good years here," she said. "Do not worry for me. I will try not to." Trying is acceptable. Elena stroked the cat until it leapt down without warning, and returned to the counter, apparently finished with sentiment. Mrs. Wren stood. "It is time." Elena rose too. Her throat tightened. She had never liked goodbyes, especially quiet ones. Dramatic goodbyes, at least, told you what shape to make with your grief. Quiet goodbyes asked you to stand in the tenderness, without instruction. Mrs. Wren took both of Elena's hands. "Listen carefully, dear." Elena nodded. "The bookshop gave you books, but it was never asking you to live inside them. It gave you doors, but it was never asking you to become a collector of thresholds. It gave you questions, but not so you would answer them perfectly." Her hands were worn. "It came because some part of you was still willing to be found. And now that part knows the way a little better." Elena's eyes filled. "What if I forget?" Mrs. Wren squeezed her hands. "You are a librarian. You know how to find things again." A laugh broke softly through Elena's tears. "Yes, and when rain comes, let it remind you. Not to search for this door, necessarily, only to soften, to listen, to open what can be opened, to leave closed what is not yours, to read for yourself, to write badly and honestly, to post the letter, to sit before you speak." Elena nodded, though the words blurred. Wren released her hands and reached behind the counter. She brought out a small parcel wrapped in brown paper and tied with green string. "One last loan." Elena took it carefully. "What is it?" "You may open it, and the shop is gone." "Will it come back?" Mrs. Wren tilted her head. "Elena," she smiled through tears. "I know, when needed." "When needed," Mrs. Wren said. They walked together to the front door. The shop seemed dimmer now, though still warm. The shelves stood quietly. The lamps burned low. Rain moved down the windows in shining lines. At the threshold, Elena turned back. "Thank you," she said. This time, Mrs. Wren did not warn her against thanking too soon. She only nodded. "It has been a pleasure finding you." The brass bell stirred above the door. Elena stepped out into the rain. The door closed softly behind her. She stood beneath the awning, holding the parcel and the gray book. For a few seconds, she did not turn around. She looked instead at the library across the street, its windows dark, except for one small lamp in the quiet reading room. The rain touched her hair, her coat, her hands. Then she turned. The rain-bound shop was still there. Mrs. Wren stood in the window. The cat sat beside her. Elena raised her hand. Mrs. Wren raised hers. The church clock struck 2. 1, 2. The rain fell between them, silver and soft. On the final bell, the shop's lights dimmed like candles cupped by careful hands. The green door blurred. The sign faded. The windows became reflections. And then there was only the blank stone wall between the apothecary and the blue house, wet with rain. Elena remained there for a long moment. The ache came. She let it. Then, beneath it, came peace. She crossed the street and entered the library. Inside, the building was dark and familiar. She did not light every lamp, only the one in the quiet reading room. Its glow welcomed her through the reference shelves, and into the small room that had once been an office, then a storage space, then grief, and now something kinder. She placed the gray book on the desk. Then she opened Mrs. Wren's parcel. Inside was a book. Of course, it was small and bound in rain-green cloth. On the cover, in simple gold letters, was the title, The Rain-Bound Bookshop. Elena's breath caught. She opened it. Most of the pages were blank. On the first page was a handwritten note. Dear Elena, some stories are not meant to be proven, only lived kindly enough that they become true for someone else. This book will not tell you everything. That would be poor storytelling, and worse magic. It will hold what you remember. It will make room for what you imagine. And if, one rainy night, someone in your library asks whether there was ever a bookshop across the street that appeared after midnight, you may smile and say, there are stories, quiet stories. That is usually enough. Warmly, Mrs. Wren. Lena held the book to her chest. Outside, the rain continued. Inside, the quiet room seemed to settle around her with deep contentment. She placed the rain-bound bookshop beside the stories Elena never began. Then she unrolled the map. It had changed one final time. The green door across the lane was still drawn there, but faintly now, as if made of mist. The marginal tea-room, the bridge, the patient stacks, and the spiral shelves remained. The library glowed warmly at the center. The quiet room-s window held a tiny yellow light, and in the blank space where the map had said, "You are here," new words had appeared. "Begin here." Elena sat down. She opened the gray book. The house stood at the end of the rain. No road in town admitted leading there. She read the first line, then the next, and all she had written. And then, while rain tapped the window and the library slept, Elena continued. She wrote of a woman who entered the house at the end of the rain and found that each room held a different kind of weather, a room of soft snowfall for grief that needed quiet, a room of warm sun for courage that had grown cold, a room of morning mist for questions not ready to be answered, a room of gentle rain for the part of the heart that still believed indoors. She wrote slowly, not trying to impress, not trying to finish, only following the path of one sentence into the next. After a while, the rain began to soften. Elena did not notice exactly when the sky lightened. She wrote until the lamp burned low and the first gray hint of dawn touched the window. Then she closed the book. He felt tired, but full, not full of answers, full of room. When morning came, the town woke beneath a clean sky. Sunlight, pale and careful, spread over the rooftops. Rainwater shone in the gutters. The apothecary opened its shutters. The bakery sent out the smell of warm bread. The blue house with the leaning chimney stood quietly beside the blank wall, which was already drying in patches. Elena opened the library at 7:45. Mr. Bellamy arrived at 8. "Rain stopped," he said. "For now." He looked at her closely. "You seem cheerful." "I slept very little." "That rarely improves people." "No," Elena said, smiling, "but I wrote." Mr. Bellamy regarded this with appropriate seriousness. "Ah." She handed him the newspaper. At 10, the young mother came in and went to the quiet room. At 11, Daniel Pite borrowed the Coastal Guide again and asked whether the library had any books about inexpensive guest houses by the sea. At noon, Mrs. Harlow brought rosemary cuttings for the window. At 1, Clara Finch asked whether Elena had any books about mysterious bookshops that were not too frightening. Elena paused. Then she smiled. "I may have just the thing." She went to the quiet reading room and took down the rain-green book Mrs. Wren had given her. It was still mostly blank, but when she opened it, the first page had changed. A simple story had appeared there. Not the whole truth, not proof, only a beginning. No one in the old town remembered when the little bookshop first began appearing. Elena looked at the words for a long moment. Then she closed the book and returned to Clara. "This one is special," she said. "You may read it here if you like." Clara accepted it with reverent seriousness and carried it to the chair by the window. Elena returned to the desk. Outside, the wall-crossed lane stood blank in daylight. But this no longer made it empty. Days passed, then weeks. The rain-bound shop did not appear again for Elena, though rain returned many times. Sometimes, after midnight, when weather softened the street, and the wall gleamed under the lamps, she would look across from her window and feel the old ache. But she no longer went down to test the stones. She had learned that not every closed door was a refusal. Some were a kindness completed. Anna wrote back. Her letter arrived on a windy Thursday, smelling faintly of paper, salt, and oranges, only because Elena imagined it did. "Dear Elena, come. The room is still waiting. The orange buns are still too sweet. I cried when I read your letter, but only in the dignified way one cries while pretending to wipe flour from one's face. Come when you can, and bring a book you love. Love." Elena read the letter in the quiet room. Then she booked a train ticket for the following month. Only 3 days away from the library. The town would survive. Mr. Bellamy announced that he would personally supervise the newspapers in her absence, which worried Elena more than it reassured her, but she accepted the offer. Daniel Pike took his own day trip to the coast before she did. When he returned, he brought her a small smooth stone from the beach. "I thought the quiet room might like it," he said. The stone now sat beside the peppermint tin. The young mother began coming to the library even on days she did not need the quiet room. Sometimes she borrowed novels. Sometimes she simply sat. Once, she left a note in the notebook that read, "I remembered my own name today, before anyone called me Mama." It felt like a small window opening. Elena copied that line into her heart. Mrs. Harlow S. Rosemary, rooted in a pot by the window. Mr. Bellamy accidentally borrowed poetry 3 more times. Clara Finch read the first page of the rain-bound bookshop and returned the next day to say the rest had been blank. "Perhaps it is waiting," Elena said. "For what?" Elena smiled. "For the rain, maybe." Clara looked toward the window, considering this with great satisfaction. Elena continued writing. Not every night, not perfectly, not with grand discipline, but often. Enough that the gray book slowly filled with the house at the end of the rain, with rooms of weather, with a librarian who was not Elena, and also was, with a bookshop that might have been real or imagined, or both. Sometimes, when she did not know what came next, she sat quietly and listened. Rain on glass, a spoon in a cup, pages turning, her own footsteps when she was not rushing. And on the first night of her visit to Anna, in a small room by the southern coast, Elena opened the window and listened to the sea. The orange buns were too sweet. She ate too. She and Anna walked by the harbor beneath gulls that truly did shout like rude old men. They did not mend everything in one conversation. They did not need to. They bought tea from a stall, visited the second-hand book table, and stood on the pier watching gray waves fold themselves gently against the posts. Anna linked her arm through Elena's. "I'm glad you came." Leon leaned lightly against her sister. "So am I." That evening, in the guest room that had indeed been waiting, Lena opened the map. The road beyond the bridge now reached the sea. At its end was a small drawing of 2 figures standing side by side on a pier. Beneath them were the words, "Some distances, close one ordinary step at a time." Elena smiled, folded the map, and slept deeply. Years later, people in the old town still told stories, quiet stories. They told of a hidden bookshop that appeared on rainy nights, after midnight, somewhere between the apothecary and the blue house with the leaning chimney. They told of a brass bell, warm lamplight, old books, handwritten notes, and a shopkeeper with silver hair who knew what tea pour before anyone asked. Some said it was nonsense. Some said they had seen Green Door reflected in a puddle. Some said the bookshop only appeared for those who were lost. But Elena, older now, wiser in ways that did not make her less curious, would sometimes hear these stories from behind the library desk and smile. If someone asked her directly, she never lied. She only said, "There are stories." And if the person asking looked tired in the quiet way, the way people look when they have been useful for too long or brave, without witness, Elena might guide them toward the quiet reading room. There would be tea there, a green chair, a notebook of anonymous kindnesses, a shelf of books that seemed, somehow, always to hold one more than she remembered placing there. And sometimes, on rainy evenings, a reader would find a small volume waiting on the desk, bound in rain-green cloth, mostly blank, except for the first line. No one in the old town remembered when the little bookshop first began appearing. The reader would look up, Elena would only smile. Outside, rain would soften the windows. The town would grow quiet. The wall across the lane would darken under the weather. And somewhere, not always heard but often felt, a brass bell would seem to ring once in the distance, clear, delicate, kind. As the years moved gently on, Elena Esson's story grew, not quickly, not famously, but steadily. She wrote in the mornings before the library opened. She wrote on rainy nights. She wrote by the sea when visiting Anna. She wrote in the quiet room while readers slept in chairs around her, each held by their own book, their own silence, their own door. The house at the end of the rain became a village. The village became a valley. The valley gained a river, a bridge, a garden, a library, and a bookshop that opened only when needed. And though Elena never wrote Mrs. Wren exactly as she had known her, there was, in one chapter, an old woman with silver hair who tended a lantern shelf and told a tired traveler, "Some doors are not meant to stay open. Some are meant to teach you that you can." Elena liked that line. She thought Mrs. Wren might have called it nearly true. And sometimes, late at night, when rain returned and the library was asleep, Elena would sit by the window with tea and listen. She no longer listened for proof. She listened for softness, for the way rain blurred the hard lines of the world, for the way streets became mirrors, for the way midnight made even ordinary rooms feel like thresholds. On those nights, she would open the rain-bound bookshop, the little green volume now kept on the desk in the quiet room. Its pages were still mostly blank, but not empty. They held notes, fragments, glimpses, a line from Daniel about the sea, a pressed rosemary leaf from Mrs. Harlow, a wobbly drawing from Clara of a green door in the rain, a sentence from Anna written during one of her visits. A sister is sometimes a house you find again after thinking the road was gone. Elena had cried over that one, undramatically, with tea. The final page of the book remained blank for a long time. Then, one winter night years later, when snow fell instead of rain, and the library windows glowed gold against the dark, Elena opened it and found words waiting there. They were not in Mrs. Wren's hand. They were in her own, or perhaps in the book's. By then, she knew the difference mattered less than it once had. The final page read, "The right story does not always take us away. Sometimes it brings us back to the room we are sitting in, the cup cooling beside us, the rain at the window, the life still open in our hands." Elena read the words. Then she closed the book gently. The fire in the quiet room had burned low. Snow touched the window without sound. The library settled around her, shelf by shelf, beam by beam, book by book. She placed the rain-bound bookshop beside her gray notebook. She turned down the lamp. At the door, she paused and looked back. The green chair waited. The rosemary leaned towards the glass. The map hung on the wall, its lines faded now, but still visible in lamplight. At its center, the words remained, "Begin here." Elena smiled. Then she stepped out, closed the door softly, and left the room to its quiet. Outside, the old town slept beneath weather. The apothecary dreamed behind dark windows. The blue house leaned peacefully under its chimney. The blank wall between them held the snow, the moonlight, and perhaps, somewhere deeper than stone, the memory of a green door. And in the library across the lane, among warm shelves and sleeping books, there was a room where anyone tired enough, gentle enough, or quietly lost enough could sit for a while and remember that not every path has to be hurried, not every question has to be answered before morning, not every door has to remain open, to have been real. The fire settled, the snow softened, a page, somewhere, turned in its sleep, and the town rested slowly, safely, kindly, as if the whole world had found, at last, the right book,